Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Mariana Jocelyn Baltira. Mariana Jocelyn Baltira was born on October 24, 2000, in Morelos, a city in the state of Mexico. She was the eldest of two children. Her mother, Syra, had a difficult time giving birth to she, as she was born much earlier than expected. At birth, she has very low weight, causing doctors to be concerned about her chances of survival, and they expressed this to her parents. Mariana spent her first 2 months in a hospital's special ward for premature infants. Her mother prayed constantly for her recovery, and prayers were answered. Her condition improved rapidly, she gained weight, and by New Year's 2001, she was discharged home. So, the girl's parents celebrated the holiday with their daughter. While she grew up slim and beautiful, her health remained fragile from an early age. When Mariana was 4 years old, her family welcomed a second child, a baby boy named Bernardo. She adored her younger brother and helped her parents care for him from an early age. The two sisters were extremely close and almost inseparable. At the age of 6, Mariana was diagnosed with epilepsy, which required her to take regular medication to reduce the chances of seizures. Thanks to effective treatment and regular supervision from experts, her condition was well managed, allowing her to live a relatively normal life, much like other children her age. She pays great attention to health care, always follows a routine and takes medicine on time. Mariana draws very well and loved music. She was kind, sincere, and open-hearted. Everyone who knew her spoke highly of her. Despite this, she was very modest and shy, especially during her teenage years. She had only a few close friends, rarely went on dates, avoided parties, and hardly interacted with boys. She preferred spending time at home with her family. Petite and delicate, she looks much younger than her actual age. Although she is 16, she is often mistaken for being 13. Her care and love for animals is demonstrated by her regular care of homeless animals, feeding them, treating them, and finding them a safe home. While in high school, she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian to provide professional care to animals in need. Mariana's parents often described her as too naive and trusting. This made them worry that someone would take advantage of her innocence and harm her. The neighborhood where her family lived was generally peaceful, and most of the residents know each other. However, their street was lined with many shops employing migrant workers, often unofficially. Some of these workers even lived inside the shops because they lacked housing. Of course, among these workers there are those with criminal records. However, the shop owner sees no problem with these workers, as long as they perform their duties responsibly. About 50 meters from Mariana's house is a butcher shop where her parents often go to buy meat. The shop owner employed 4 workers, 2 locals who managed the sales and 2 outsiders who handled unloading, preparing the meat, and cleaning the shop. The outsiders lived in an attic on the shop's 2nd floor. As Mariana grew up, her parents occasionally asked her to do errands, such as buying meat at this butcher shop. There, she repeatedly encountered Juan Cruz Quintero Martinez, a handyman who lived on the 2nd floor. Just his appearance was enough to make her extremely scared. She often told her parents about this, describing his sinister gaze that made her blood run cold. However, he never approached or interacted with her, he only looked at her. Since there was no specific reason to accuse him, her parents decided it was best to not let her go to that store anymore. Instead, they began doing the shopping themselves. Then, one committed a minor theft, leading the store owner to fire him. From then on, no one heard from him for about a year. However, at the start of summer 2017, he showed up at the store again, asking his former employer for his job back. Surprisingly, he was rehired and moved back into the 2nd floor of the store. One day, Cyrus' niece was visiting their family. At that time, Mariana and her younger brother, Bernardo, were also at home because they have summer vacation. That morning, only Orlando, her father, had left the house around 9 a.m. Syra asked Mariana to go to the local supermarket to buy groceries for breakfast. Normally, she didn't let Mariana go out alone, but she thought her daughter was old enough to handle the task quickly and safely. It was bright outside, the streets were busy, and she believed nothing bad could possibly happen. Syra gave Mariana some money and asked her to buy milk, eggs, and vegetables. When little girl left the house, she wore an old t-shirt and pajama pants. The store was less than a few hundred meters away, so the trip to buy the groceries and return home in no more than 30 minutes. However, when an hour passed and little girl still hadn't returned, Syra became worried. She had left her phone at home, so Syra, holding her little niece in her arms, went out to search for her daughter. Syra walked to the store and asked the cashiers if they had seen Mariana, a young girl wearing glasses. They told Cyrus that the girl had been there, bought the groceries a couple of hours ago, and left. At that moment, Syra began to realize that something terrible had happened to her daughter. She hurried back home, asked Bernardo to watch over her niece, and went out again to continue the search. Syra began asking neighbors, street vendors, and passers-by if they had seen Mariana. However, the little girl seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Immediately after that, Syra immediately contacted the police and called her husband, Orlando. He took a break from work and rushed home to help search for Mariana. By the time the police arrived, dozens of neighbors, along with relatives and friends of the Baltira family, joined the search for Mariana. They distributed flyers with her picture. Initially, police asked the parents if their daughter might have gone on a date, met a friend, or visited someone. Her parents firmly denied these theories, insisting that she would never leave without informing them, especially since she had gone to the store in home clothes and carry a grocery bag. The area where Mariana disappeared had surveillance cameras, but almost none of them were functioning. Despite searching all day, no clues or traces of little girl were found. As night fell, the initial anxiety and panic turned into despair. The parents began to fear the worst, that their daughter would no longer live. On July 28, around 8 a.m., Mariana's parents received a call from a relative who lived nearby. The relative informed them that several police cars had arrived at the butcher's shop. Then, they quickly got ready and went to the scene. However, the police did not allow them inside, claiming that the situation had nothing to do with their daughter. Despite this, they were still resolutely not to leave. A few minutes later, after inspecting the premises, a police officer approached Mariana's father, Orlando, and informed him that the body of a young girl, matching the description of Mariana, had been found on the second floor of the building. The body was lifeless and severely mutilated. Orlando was asked to come inside for identification, but the officers strongly advised against it, warning that the scene was extremely gruesome. When Orlando entered and saw the body of his beloved daughter lying in a pool of blood, he felt like the whole world had collapsed. He was at a loss as to how to break the sad news to his wife, who was waiting outside. The cause of death was determined to be massive blood loss from a deep wound to the stomach. It was later discovered that the criminal had cut out the girl's stomach while she was still alive and left her to bleed to death. Experts concluded that Mariana died in the early hours of July 28, just hours before her body was discovered. This meant she had been alive for nearly 24 hours after her disappearance. During that time, the murderer continuously tortured the girl. Then he caused the wound that caused her death. The murder weapon was identified as a butcher knife, which was found on the floor near her body. The store owner discovered the horrific incident when he came to work in the morning. According to the butcher shop owner, every last Thursday of the month, the shop closes for cleaning. On this day, The owner focused on organizational tasks, held meetings with suppliers, and submitted reports to the tax inspectorate. Meanwhile, the employees disinfected and cleaned the premises. On Thursday morning, July 27, 2017, when the owner arrived at the store, he immediately noticed bloodstains on the floor. At first, he thought one of his employees who lived on the second floor might have been injured. However, upon going upstairs, he was stunned to see his employee's belongings covered in blood, as well as a knife and the body of a young girl in a pool of blood. Additionally, a significant amount of money was missing from the cash register, which the criminal had likely taken in fleeing the scene. 2 employees who lived and worked at the store immediately became suspects. However, an hour later, one of them arrived at the store, just as shocked as everyone by what had happened. He said that the day before, he was busy so he had to go back to his hometown, and the other employee agreed to cover his shift. The police determined his account to be truthful, as there was no evidence placing him at the crime scene. As a result, he was removed from the list of suspects. By that time, investigators had obtained CCTV footage from the supermarket where Mariana was shopping on the last day of her life. The footage showed little girl entering the store, followed a few minutes later by Juan Martinez, the butcher. His behavior was unsettling. He appeared to stalk her, like a predator tracking its prey. Without purchasing anything, he left the supermarket shortly after she. After that, both of them vanished. Although there were street cameras in the area, they were not functioning. Additionally, none of the many passers-by or street vendors reported seeing anything unusual. Mariana's parents were adamant that their daughter would never willingly leave with Juan, regardless of what he might have said or done to persuade her. They believe he must have forced the girl into the butcher shop. However, this raised a question: why hadn't little girl screamed or called for help? Once again, no witnesses noticed anything out of the ordinary. In 2015, Juan came under police scrutiny for harassment and causing serious bodily harm. He had started working as an assistant in a butcher's shop earlier that year. According to the shop owner, he was diligent and raised no concerns for a long time. However, in mid-2016, he was caught stealing money and was fired. After losing his job, he moved back to the suburbs to live with his parents. There, he lived with his old and weak mother and his sister, who was her primary caregiver. Juan took advantage of his family, stealing money and belongings from the house. He abusing alcohol and illegal drugs. He frequently physically assaulted his mother and sister. Eventually, his sister, fed up with his abusive behavior, threatened to report him to the police. Because he was afraid of being arrested by the police, he decided to leave home. He went to his old employer, the owner of a butcher's shop, and asked to be rehired. The owner agreed, giving him both a job and allowed him to live on the second floor of the store. This happened in mid-June, about a month before a tragic incident unfolded. At first, Juan performed his work diligently. However, about a week later, he meets Mariana, who has changed and matured over the past year. While little girl avoided any interaction with him and never shopped at the butcher's shop, he began stalking her, following her through the streets and observing her daily routes. Another butcher, the who lives with Juan on the second floor, noticed his obsession with Mariana. Little did he know that Juan would soon commit a horrific crime. After Juan was identified as the sole suspect in the rape and murder of Mariana, all available resources were mobilized to find him. The police initially focused on his home, suspecting that his relatives might help him evade capture. However, his sister insisted that he was not welcome there and explained that he knew his family would immediately turn him in to the authorities. She showed no surprise over the horrific crime he had committed. In fact, she revealed that he had previously raped their elderly mother and even attacked her with a knife, threatening to cut her open like a pig if she didn't give him money for drugs. Finding Juan was a top priority for the police, because he was highly aggressive, cruel, and a serious threat to others. The money he stole from the cash register could have lasted him a long time, but no one knew what he might do next. Will he reoffend after killing Mariana? For an entire month, the police searched the Morelos area and nearby suburbs, believing he couldn't have gone far. However, over time, they still could not find he. Information about Mariana's murder quickly spread nationwide through the media, causing police forces across the country to simultaneously hunt for the cruel murderer. Juan's photograph was broadcast daily on television, printed on the front pages of newspapers, and plastered on streets nationwide with the label "Ruthless Killer" at large. A substantial bounty was offered for any information about his location or help in capturing him, and the reward amount kept increasing. Yet, despite these efforts, the case made no progress. The search for Juan was very difficult. He had no contact with his family, no friends, no social media accounts, no mobile phone, and he didn't use credit cards. After 6 months of trying to locate him without any success, the reward for information about him was raised to about $250,000. Even so, there were no leads. Juan was finally captured in August 2019, 2 years after Mariana's murder. He was found nearly 1,000 kilometers away from the crime scene. In another state, thanks to an elderly woman who recognized him on the street. She noticed his suspicious behavior, as he constantly hid his face with a hood and sunglasses, and reported him to the police. She unaware that he was one of the most wanted criminals in Mexico. Juan was arrested right on the street, and to the surprise of the authorities, he did not resist. He calmly extended his hands, allowing officers to put handcuffs on him. The next day, after confirming his identity, the authorities transported him to Morelos, where the crime took place. He was placed in custody in a local prison while awaiting trial. In May 2022, 5 years after the tragic incident, the court sentenced Juan Cruz Quintero Martinez, who committed the murder and rape, to life in prison without parole. He must also pay approximately $49,000 in compensation for the damages he caused to Mariana's family. Mariana's parents and younger brother expressed that the arrest of her killer brought them great relief, as it ensured he could no longer harm other girls. However, they also acknowledged that no punishment, not even life imprisonment or restitution, could ease the pain in their hearts. Their beloved daughter and older sister was gone, and they would have to carry this sorrow for the rest of their lives. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois. She was the daughter of Marcy and Jay Kira, who described her as a bubbly, dedicated, and sweet person. Kira worked at the Mall of America, where she held positions at 2 stores, Wet Seal and, most recently, Delia's. Her co-workers were not only her best friends but also her family. She had a unique ability to see strengths in others that they had not yet seen. Kira had planned a bright and peaceful future. Unfortunately, her dreams came to an abrupt end when Kira mysteriously disappeared. On Thursday, February 21, 2013, Kira had a shift. Her co-workers said she was feeling well and had plans to go out to dinner at a fancy restaurant with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, after work. Kira and Jeffrey met 3 years ago and quickly fell in love. Kira and Jeffrey began a romantic relationship and eventually married, forming a happy and stable couple. Although they sometimes disagreed, they resolved everything in private, without letting anyone know about these disagreements. 2 days later, on Saturday, February 23, when Kira failed to show up for work, her co-workers became concerned because this was unlike her. Kira was always punctual, strict with herself and others, never late, and always kept to a schedule. When Kira could not be reached, her co-workers called Jeffrey, but he did not know where his wife was. Jeffrey said that Kira had left home the morning before and had not returned. He was not too worried because Kira had a habit of occasionally being absent for a day or two, often staying overnight at friends' or relatives' houses without notice. However, the bad weather with heavy snow that day may have worried him. Jeffrey thought that something might have happened to her on the road. Perhaps her car broke down and her cell phone ran out of battery. That same day, not receiving any news from his wife, Jeffrey reported her missing and contacted Kira's family. Her family was shocked by the mysterious disappearance of their loved one, and this was a huge shock for them. After receiving the report of Kira Steger's disappearance, detectives immediately began investigating. Investigators began by questioning Jeffrey and searching the nearby area. Detectives went to Jeffrey's home to talk to him. Jeffrey said that on Thursday, he and Kira wanted to spend time together. They had dinner, talked, went bowling, and then left the mall. According to Jeffrey, they both went home soon after because Kira planned to watch a movie. Jeffrey also told the detectives that his wife had left the house the following morning, Friday, around 8:30. A meeting had been scheduled at work that she had to attend. Kira was acting normally, and Jeffrey did not notice anything unusual. Jeffrey did not find anything unusual about Kira's occasional disappearances, although he did not know where she went or who she was spending time with. Jeffrey said that they had been having relationship problems for the past few months. However, he did not find it serious or alarming, but rather viewed it as the usual small arguments that occur in every family. The detective asked Jeffrey about who Kira might be seeing and whether she was in any other relationship. Jeffrey dismissed this idea, as he had asked Kira directly and she had denied it. According to Jeffrey, he truly loved Kira and trusted her. Investigators turned over all the information they had gathered about Kira and her car to the patrol team. Detectives also went directly to the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's statements and look for clues. The Mall of America, located in Bloomington, is one of the largest malls in the world, with 520 stores, an amusement park, an aquarium, a movie theater, a golf course, and many other amenities. The mall has numerous security cameras, so detectives reviewed the footage of Kira leaving the company on February 21st. The video did not show anything unusual. Jeffrey's initial statement was very credible. He met Kira after work. They stayed in the mall for a while, then went down to the parking lot and left. There was no argument, and the evening went smoothly. Waiting without knowing what had happened was difficult, and each passing day made Kira's family more and more worried about her safety. With no word from her, Kira's family traveled to Bloomington to help with the investigation. They printed flyers with Kira's picture on them, posted them on utility poles, and handed them out to passers-by. Their goal was to attract as much attention as possible to find Kira. They knew they couldn't just stand by and had to take action to find their loved one. While Kira's family was handing out flyers, the investigators continued their investigation. While interviewing neighbors, the police discovered a surveillance camera on a neighbor's home. The camera was pointed at Kira and Jeffrey's home. The investigators asked the homeowner to copy the footage from the camera because they hoped to find clues in it. Meanwhile, records from a cell phone company provided them with a new lead. According to phone records, Kira was in a relationship with someone other than Jeffrey. That person was Ryan Wendt, the manager of the chain of stores where she worked. They had a deep relationship and corresponded frequently. Police determined that Ryan had left the state and that when the search for Kira began, Ryan was driving to Colorado. This man was closely related to the investigation because, in addition to his relationship with Kira, he was out of state at the time of her disappearance. It could be a coincidence, or there could be something else going on behind his departure. Investigators needed answers. After several attempts, detectives were able to contact Ryan. He said the last time he had contact with Kira was when he was driving through South Dakota and texting her. These messages were sent shortly before Kira went missing. After reviewing the timestamps, detectives determined that Kira had contacted her new lover while she was having dinner with her husband. The messages showed that Kira had become increasingly distant from Jeffrey. Investigators ran a cell tower location check on Ryan's phone and checked his credit card statements. The results showed that he was indeed out of state that night and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. As a result, Ryan was released and cleared as a suspect. The timestamps on the messages showed that Kira was still texting Ryan even after she returned home to her husband. However, after 11:44 p.m., their conversation stopped, and Kira's phone was no longer active. Meanwhile, another investigation team was preparing to review video from a surveillance camera installed at Kira's neighbor's home. The camera captured most of the street scene from left to right. However, it rotated so quickly that it was difficult to observe. If the camera saw something suspicious, it immediately moved in another direction. Jeffrey and Kira's house was only visible for a few seconds when the camera panned to the right. Jeffrey said that after dinner and bowling, he and Kira went home, watched a movie, and went to bed. However, when investigators reviewed the footage, they discovered that just after 2 a.m., Kira's car backed into the driveway. Because the footage was poor and the camera kept moving, it was difficult to determine exactly what was happening at that time. The car then left the house. Jeffrey explained that Kira had asked him to fill up her car with gas for work the next day, so he went to the gas station. Surprisingly, this story was true. He was seen at the gas station around 3:30 a.m. However, detectives discovered that after leaving the gas station, he headed toward the highway instead of home. It is unclear where Jeffrey went next. The neighbor's camera did not record him returning, but this may have been a coincidence since the camera was always moving. Therefore, in theory, Jeffrey could have gotten home later since the camera was capturing a different angle. When investigators reviewed the video, they saw Kira's Chevrolet leave at 9:21 a.m. Unfortunately, they couldn't determine who was driving. A missing person report was filed on Saturday, February 23rd, and on Monday, February 25th, police received a call about a suspicious car parked near the shopping center where Kira worked. There are 2 multi-story parking lots there. A security guard found the car parked for several days and asked for it to be towed. When the driver inspected the car before towing it, he noticed suspicious red stains on the trunk lid and immediately called the police. That car turned out to be Kira's white car. Although there wasn't much blood, just a few small stains, it was still very concerning. In the car, they found Kira's wallet and a divorce form downloaded from the internet. Additionally, a dark object in the snow behind the car caught the attention of the investigators. As they approached, they found a rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains. DNA testing confirmed that it was Kira Steger's blood. The investigators were devastated to realize that Kira was most likely dead. This heartbreaking news was a huge shock to her family and friends. Their last hope of seeing Kira again was dashed, leaving them with questions. How did she die? Was she in pain? Who could hate her enough to take her life? The fact that Kira's body had not been found added to the confusion, as the endless grief seemed unlikely to be alleviated. The detectives made it a top priority to find out who had left the car in the parking lot. The car left the house at 9:21 a.m., and about 20 minutes later, it was caught on a mall camera. There were no cameras in the parking lot where the car was found, but another camera recorded the road leading to the lot, which was located near where Kira's car was parked. After reviewing the camera footage, detectives found that a hooded man appeared a few minutes after Kira's white Chevrolet pulled into the lot. It was cold enough that it was not unusual for him to be wearing a hoodie, but detectives wanted to learn more about where he went. The hooded man was seen walking across the street and approaching a taxi stand. He briefly chatted with a driver, then got into a cab and drove away. Police were able to determine the company that owned the taxis in the mall parking lot. Based on the time he spent talking to the drivers, police were able to determine the license plate numbers. All of the taxis had GPS tracking devices, which showed that the man ended up about a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house and left after paying in cash. As the taxi left the neighborhood, it was caught on camera, the same camera that had filmed part of Kira and Jeffrey's house. 2 minutes later, a man in a hoodie entered the frame. The low resolution of the video made it difficult to identify his face, but the white logo on his shirt was clearly visible. As investigators continued to examine the video, they saw the man enter Kira and Jeffrey's house. Kira was missing, leading to suspicions that the hooded man might be Jeffrey. After obtaining a search warrant, the police went to the house. At first, the house looked normal and unremarkable. However, upon closer inspection, forensic experts discovered dark red stains in Kira and Jeffrey's bedroom. There were several on the wall near the bed and about 100 on the mattress. It was clear that the bedroom had been rearranged and cleaned recently. When the forensic team sprayed luminol, the carpeting glowed. There were bloodstains throughout the house that were not visible to the naked eye. The bloodstains originated in the bedroom and extended to other areas of the house. Forensic testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kira, leading investigators to believe that she was no longer alive. In addition to searching the house, police also searched Jeffrey's car. There were no bloodstains or signs of a struggle. However, they found one interesting detail: a gas station receipt in Jeffrey's car, dated 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned in the mall parking lot. According to the receipt, the transaction was made using Jeffrey's card. Detectives went to the gas station to review the security cameras. The camera recorded Jeffrey filling up with gas, then going inside to withdraw money from an ATM. The video clearly showed Jeffrey's face and a logo on his jacket that looked similar to the logo on the man in the earlier footage. With video evidence and all the evidence in the house, Jeffrey Trevino, 39, was arrested. He was taken to the police station for questioning and is now the prime suspect. Immediately after being released from the interrogation room, Jeffrey contacted a lawyer and was advised to exercise his right to remain silent. The police had enough evidence to charge him, but the most compelling evidence was Kira's body. No one suspected Kira was dead at the time. Police, Kira's family, and volunteers searched for her for months. In late March, as the snow melted, a volunteer found a strange bag on the edge of Keller Lake a few miles from Jeffrey's house and called the police. The bag contained a bloody pillow, a shirt, and a bra. The forensic team linked these items to Kira because her DNA was found on them. The lake remained frozen, hampering the search. However, when divers surveyed the water, they found no remains. The area around the lake was searched several times with 4 cadaver dogs, trained to find dead bodies, but to no avail. 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, on May 8, 2013, the St. Paul Police Department received a disturbing call. The caller reported that he had seen what appeared to be a body in the Mississippi River. Police discovered and recovered a body. The body was naked. Dental records identified it as Kira Steger. She had suffered severe trauma to the forehead and a broken left index finger. Because the body was so badly decomposed, the medical examiner was unable to determine the exact cause of death. Using new evidence, investigators attempted to reconstruct a timeline of the events leading up to Kira's death and the events that followed. They believed that when Kira and Jeffrey returned home, Jeffrey found her texting with someone else. When Kira refused to show her husband the messages, he snatched the phone from her and broke her fingers. After reading the romantic messages, Jeffrey became even angrier, and in a fit of rage, he killed Kira and tried to cover up the crime. He drove Kira's car to the house, put the body in the trunk, then went to the gas station before taking the body to the riverbank and dumping it. He then returned home, discarding the bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes along the way. The next morning, he went to the gas station to withdraw cash from an ATM, knowing that after leaving Kira's car in the shopping center car park, he would need cash to pay for a taxi. After leaving Kira's car, Jeffrey went home and spent the day cleaning. He tried to make it look like Kira had driven away that morning and that nothing had happened. However, this plan was foiled by surveillance cameras. In October 2013, a jury convicted Jeffrey Trevino, 39. They accepted that his actions were not intentional and that they were the result of a heated after discovering that his wife was having an affair. Before the judge handed down his sentence, Kira's family spoke out. "This monster was a calculating criminal," said Carrie Ann Steger, Kira's sister. "He deserves no mercy." Kira's mother, Marcy, said Jeffrey showed no sympathy for her daughter. "He dumped my daughter like a piece of trash into the most polluted water in the country," she said. But her father, Jay, said, "No punishment can ever make up for the pain Jeffrey has caused our family. No amount of time for Jeffrey is enough, never enough," he said. In November 2013, Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959, in Houston, Texas. Kathy grew up in a peaceful and happy family. During her childhood, she was very close to her older sister. When she was a teenager, Kathy met Mike Odom, whom she would later marry and start a family. After the wedding, the two settled in a quiet suburb outside of Houston, and soon after, they had a daughter and a son. After the birth of their second child, Kathy stayed home and took care of the children. Meanwhile, Mike worked at her father's small sign factory. Thanks to the financial support of Kathy's parents, the family was able to provide for their children. Therefore, Kathy was able to take care of the children without having to worry about working extra. On March 3, 1987, Kathy stayed home to take care of the children as usual. Mike went to work and then met up with friends at a bar after work. He called Kathy from a pay phone, but she didn't answer. This worried Mike because Kathy rarely left the house. He called several times but got no response. Worried about his wife, Mike called their neighbor, Tim Robinson, and asked him to check on her. Tim went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. He looked through the living room window and saw that the television was still on. So he knocked again but got no response. At this point, he began to worry that something serious might have happened to Kathy. Instead of going home to call Mike or the police, he decided to drive around town looking for police patrols. After a few minutes of searching, he spotted a police car and explained the situation. He asked them to check on Kathy to see if she was okay. When the police arrived at the house, they also got no response to their knocking. They decided to try the door and found it unlocked. Once inside, the police found Kathy's older daughter lying unconscious on the sofa, clearly traumatized but still alive. The police quickly called an ambulance and continued to check other rooms in the house. In the bedroom, they found the younger child lying in her crib, safe and sound. But when they entered another room, they discovered a horrific scene. Kathy was lying on the floor, covered in blood and naked. The police immediately determined that she was dead. Her arms were also tied with a light cord. Paramedics took Kathy's daughter to the hospital and began investigating the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived at the house, but the police did not reveal any specific details. Instead, They asked him to go to the hospital to care for his granddaughter when she woke up. While waiting at the hospital, he learned of his daughter's death from a news report on TV. When Mike arrived at the house, the police quickly discovered something strange. He arrived late and had blood-like stains on his shirt. The police asked him to hand over his clothes and answer questions. During this time, the police discovered some interesting signs. They found several blood stains in the bathroom, indicating that the attacker had tried to hide the evidence after the crime. This suggested that the attacker had been in the house for some time to clean up. Forensic experts also discovered some important clues. There were no signs of forced entry, and all the windows and doors except the front door were locked. This suggested that Kathy had invited the attacker into the house or that the attacker had a key. Police speculated that the attacker may have threatened to harm Kathy's children if she screamed or resisted. Therefore, Kathy may have complied with the attacker's demands, hoping to be spared, but was ultimately murdered. As doctors worked to save Kathy's daughter, they discovered that she had been brutally beaten, most likely with her bare hands. She spent several hours in critical condition at the hospital, and her chances of survival were still very low. After examining Kathy's body, medical experts determined that she had suffered severe injuries with 16 stab wounds, most of which were concentrated in the abdomen. They also discovered that she had been sexually assaulted and collected biological samples of the offender from the scene. However, at that time, DNA analysis methods were not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, experts were unable to extract DNA profiles from biological samples. They were only able to determine the killer's blood type, so the sample was sent to the lab for further analysis. The police had noticed suspicious stains on his shirt early in the investigation and had kept the clothes for examination. His behavior that evening was very suspicious. He had gone out with friends after work, but instead of going home when he couldn't reach his wife, he asked a neighbor to check on him. The police had seen similar cases before, where a husband killed his wife and created an alibi by going out with friends. He would then ask someone else to check on his wife to avoid being the first to discover the body and throwing the police off the trail. The police expanded their investigation to see if Mike might have planned the murder before meeting his friends. They also discovered that Mike had a criminal record. After graduating from high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover police officer. Mike was sentenced to 6 years in prison but only served 2 years before being paroled. He later married Kathy. Although Mike had a criminal record, the police needed more evidence to charge him. The police also began investigating Mike's neighbor, Tim, because of signs of suspicion. Tim drove around town looking for patrol officers instead of calling the police. The police checked Tim's car and found suspicious blood-like stains on the carpet. They sent these samples to the lab for analysis. Now investigators wondered if Mike and Tim might have worked together to commit the crime. After completing the report, the medical examiner came to an important conclusion. Kathy's time of death was around 1 p.m. before she was discovered around 6 p.m. The police expanded their investigation to determine the suspect's whereabouts around that time and to find out what they did after the murder. Mike and Tim both claimed to be at work at the time. So the police set out to see if their statements were accurate. 2 days after the murder, they received a call from the hospital saying Kathy's daughter had woken up. The police went to see her in the hope that she would provide important information about what had happened. However, they encountered a major obstacle. The 4-year-old girl's memory was almost completely erased. She only remembered a light-haired man entering the house, while Mike and Tim had dark hair. But the police did not rule them out as suspects. They believed that the severe trauma could have made her memory inaccurate. The police received a call from the lab with surprising information. Experts examined the evidence and found that the stain on Tim's car carpet was motor oil, and the stain on Mike's shirt was just paint, not evidence of a crime. In addition, many of Mike and Tim's co-workers also confirmed that they had been at work all day and did not leave until the evening. Thus, they had no opportunity to go to Kathy's house and commit the crime. The police requested a lie detector test and the results showed that neither of them were lying. There was no conclusive evidence. The police had to review the entire case and investigate other suspects who might be familiar to Kathy's family, because the attacker could have easily entered Kathy's house. During the investigation, they had conversations with Kathy's relatives and friends to find out who they thought might have committed the crime. Many of them immediately named the same person, Greg. Greg was Kathy's brother-in-law, and her loved ones revealed that she often complained about his behavior. Specifically, according to Kathy, Greg openly flirted with her and repeatedly tried to convince her to have sex with him. Kathy also said that Greg often made inappropriate comments about her appearance, especially about her abdomen. And according to the evidence collected, we know that most of the injuries were on Kathy's abdomen. The police also knew that Greg had a history of illegal drug use and a criminal record. Therefore, the police began to suspect him and soon found some important clues. They found Greg's fingerprints matched one in Kathy's house, as well as a hair that matched his. However, it should be noted that Greg often visited Kathy's family, so it is possible that the fingerprints and hair were in the house before the murder occurred. Kathy's parents also believed that he was the one who killed their daughter. Kathy's mother specifically remembered one time when Greg visited Kathy's daughter at the hospital. When she saw Greg, she had a clear look of fear on her face. These observations suggested that she was afraid of him. However, when asked, she could not remember what happened on the day of the murder. After hearing all this information, the police summoned Greg for questioning. However, he denied any involvement in the murder and said that he was with a friend at the time. During the questioning, Greg asked to go to the parking lot because he was afraid of being fined for expired parking. However, he did not return to the police station. Greg's wife, Kathy's sister, said that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m. This meant that Greg had a 4-hour window around the time of the murder, enough time for him to commit the crime. However, the police still did not find enough evidence to prove Greg's involvement in the murder. In a last-ditch effort to find more clues, the police decided to analyze a semen sample taken from Kathy's body. However, at that time, the technology only allowed for the blood type of the owner of the semen sample to be determined. In addition, the analysis of the samples collected from the case was too small to be tested. However, the police still decided to perform the test. The results showed that the blood type of the owner of the semen sample matched Greg's blood type, but this was not enough to conclude that he was guilty. As a result, the police were unable to arrest him. They continued to search for more evidence, but were unable to prove that Greg was involved in the case. Kathy's family believed that Greg was the killer. Kathy's sister Shelley still did not believe that her husband was involved in the case and continued to live with him. In the years that followed, the police continued to revisit the case, hoping to find any new clues. In 1998, 11 years after Kathy was murdered, they requested a DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, experts were only able to extract a partial DNA profile, which, when compared to Greg's DNA, showed that Greg was among the 2% of the population who could match the profile. He could not be arrested based on this result. The police again called Greg in for questioning, telling him that the semen from Kathy's body matched his DNA. Greg then changed his original statement, saying that Kathy had been romantically involved with him and that he had actually visited her on the day of the murder, but Greg insisted that she was still alive when he left. The police were suspicious of Greg's sudden change in story because suspects often change their stories when they hear about DNA evidence. In addition, Kathy had complained about Greg's flirtations, feeling uncomfortable around him. So it was unlikely that she would have had a secret relationship with him. But the police knew that they could not convict without a perfect DNA match. The local police reviewed the case and confirmed that a guilty verdict was almost impossible, and the case was put on hold again for many years. In 2002, the police reopened the case and asked for help from forensic scientist Catherine Long. At the time, Catherine was doing groundbreaking DNA research. She and her colleagues wanted to know if the offender's DNA might still be on Kathy's body after the strangulation, and if they could extract that DNA for analysis. To test this, Catherine and her team conducted a simulation experiment. They followed the steps the perpetrators took by briefly strangling each other, then taking samples from their hands and necks for analysis. The results showed that even in such a short interaction, there were still enough skin cells to extract and analyze DNA. The police began to focus on the available evidence when they were unable to re-examine her body. They decided to thoroughly examine all the items related to the case to see if the perpetrator had come into contact with them. They quickly noticed the string of lights that the killer had used to tie Kathy's hands, which the police gave to Catherine and her colleagues to examine. As they began their work, they noticed that the string had been stored in a paper bag. This was important because the paper bag allowed air to circulate, preventing moisture buildup and protecting the biological samples. Experts used cotton swabs to collect biological samples from the entire length of the rope. They paid special attention to areas on the rope that still had traces of Kathy's blood. After analysis, they discovered 2 DNA profiles. The first profile, belonging to the victim Kathy, the second profile completely matched Greg's DNA sample. The police finally had evidence that Greg was the one who tied Kathy's hands, and that he was the killer. 15 years after Kathy's death, the perpetrator was finally arrested. During questioning, Greg did not confess, insisting that he had a romantic relationship with Kathy. The police did not believe him. While awaiting trial, Greg was detained. A cellmate of Greg's contacted the police and said that Greg had confessed to him. According to the friend, Greg told them the details of the attack and murder. Greg said that one day, he had been using illegal drugs and went to Kathy's house. Once inside, Greg tried to force Kathy to have sex, but she refused and asked him to leave. However, Greg became aggressive and attacked Kathy's daughter, causing many serious injuries. Greg assured Kathy that if she did not comply with his wishes, he would kill her. Kathy had no choice but to agree to protect her children. Greg then tied her up, attacked her, and killed her with many injuries. To cover up the crime, Greg washed the blood off himself in the bathroom and changed into Kathy's husband's clothes before leaving the school. The police forced Greg to face the truth. This time, Greg confessed to killing Kathy. In 2004, he pleaded guilty in court and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. However, he only served 4 years before dying at the age of 56 of liver cancer. Kathy's husband, Mike, died at the age of 45. For 15 years, Kathy's family, including her parents and children, waited patiently, trusting that the police would find the killer. Although they believed Greg was the killer, they saw him continue to live with their second daughter, but there was nothing they could do. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Belinda Temple. Belinda Temple was born and raised in Texas. In 1986, Belinda went to college in her hometown, while her twin sister, Brenda, left to study at Stephen F. Austin University. Belinda decided to stay with her parents because she was dating Marshall Kummer, who was 3 years older than her. She was completely absorbed in the relationship. However, Belinda's parents were not pleased. They were concerned that the relationship would disrupt her studies, leading to her having children early and dropping out of school. This caused a lot of tension in the family. Belinda's mother, Carol, did not agree to her daughter living with Marshall. Belinda was a strong-willed and determined girl, and she may have taken her mother's advice as a threat. So at a family dinner when Marshall was invited, Belinda and Marshall, despite their mother's objections, announced that they were getting married. The atmosphere at the dinner table became heavy and quiet. Belinda decided to get married to prove to her parents she was an adult. Her boyfriend wasn't eager but didn't refuse. They married without a grand celebration, with Belinda wearing her sister's white dress and spending the day with friends drinking champagne. The next day, she moved in with him at his parents' place. The marriage was mainly to stop her mom's criticism and gain independence. But not 6 months later, Marshall began to spend little time at home, saying he was working late, but was actually with another woman. Belinda found out when she noticed that her husband was acting strangely one day. She waited until his workday was over and followed her husband, and that's when it all came to light. Marshall was walking hand in hand with some strange woman, most likely with his colleague. Belinda didn't start any arguments or jealousy, she just packed her things and went back to her mother. Marshall kept trying to ask for Belinda's forgiveness, but she wouldn't budge. After that, they soon divorced. In 1987, Belinda had nothing to keep her in her hometown, so she decided to follow her sister to Stephen F. Austin State University. Her time at the university was a positive experience for Belinda. It seemed that she had found her purpose. In addition to studying, Belinda also worked part-time as a basketball coach, and the young girl had very high expectations. At the same university, Belinda met David Temple. Like Belinda, he was also a part-time coach, but in soccer, and he was also a member of the university soccer team as captain. For David, soccer was an integral part of life. He had started practicing soccer since he was a child, and from that time on it was clear that he had the potential to become a star at school. He often played soccer very successfully for the team and was respected by all the teachers, despite his unpleasant personality. David can easily insult or even hit someone, but he gets away with it easily when he is on the field during a match. He often starts the match in a heated situation and then takes a long time to calm down. One of David's teammates said that he has an aggressive nature because of his steroid use. However, in their relationship, David acts completely differently from Belinda. He becomes a caring person and loves her very much. As soon as someone smiles at Belinda, David becomes jealous and tries to clarify his relationship. Belinda met David's family and they were impressed with her. They thought that Belinda and David had a lot in common. But Belinda's sister was not happy about the relationship. They knew Belinda as a strong-willed and independent person before, but as the relationship began, they noticed a change in her. Belinda became withdrawn, quiet and modest, and her life seemed to revolve around pleasing David. Belinda also began to distance herself from her family. She called her parents less often and stopped visiting home as she used to. This was a worrying sign in a toxic relationship. However, David and Belinda continued their relationship. They bought a bull terrier and named him Shaq. After graduating from college, they decided to get married. In January 1999, David and Belinda Temple were expecting their second child. Belinda was nearing her due date, and doctors predicted that she would go into labor in a few weeks. As a pregnant mother, Belinda often felt tired and fatigued. She also had to care for her son Evan. To give his wife some rest, David decided to take Evan for a walk in the park that evening. They walked in the fresh air, but soon felt tired and hungry. They then went to a restaurant for a bite to eat. When they got home, David was shocked to find the front door of his house broken. To keep Evan safe, David quickly took his son to a friend's house who lived nearby, and when his son asked why he couldn't come home, David lied and said his mother was in the hospital. One of David's neighbors, Quentin Harland, had just opened the door to the unexpected visitor, David. He carried his son straight into the living room and quickly returned to the house. Quentin was confused by this and yelled for his wife to watch the child and ran after David. He asked David, "What's going on?" but when he saw the broken front door of the Temple house, Quentin realized that David probably had no idea what was waiting for him inside. When he entered the house, Quentin saw a horrible scene. Everything was in ruins, the cabinets were open, furniture was scattered on the floor, and especially there were blood stains on the floor leading to the stairs. Quentin quickly pushed David aside and saw under the stairs, in the dressing room, Belinda lying face down with her arms outstretched in a large hole in the back of her head. David seemed too shocked to say anything or rush to his wife's body. He took out his cell phone and called the police. Police immediately rushed to the scene but did not enter the house immediately because the Temple family's dog, Shaq, was aggressive. The dog growled and barked at the uniformed officers, prompting one of them to draw his gun. However, the situation was calmed when David Temple came out of the house, then led the dog into the garage. When the officers entered the house, they investigated the scene and concluded that it appeared that a robbery had occurred. They speculated that the burglars did not know that the homeowner was in the house at the time, so they shot her to avoid exposing witnesses. The police began investigating the crime scene. They wondered how the burglar could have entered a house guarded by a ferocious bull terrier. They began to investigate carefully. At the main entrance, the police found broken glass. But this glass was not broken by someone trying to unlock it from the inside, as the glass fragments would have been concentrated near the threshold. Instead, the glass fragments were located far from the door, to the right of the entrance. This indicated that the main door was unlocked and the glass was broken, and it was unclear why the burglar did so. The police opened a box on the nightstand in the living room and found several pieces of jewelry that appeared to be gold. It was unclear why the burglar did not take these pieces of jewelry. The more they investigated, the more suspicious the police became that something was not right around the case. The police's experience with robberies had taught them that the criminal would usually take whatever was valuable and could be found. But in this case, nothing seemed to have been taken. And the fact that the dog was still in their minds was a big deal. Something was wrong with the case. In the murder, the wound suggested the victim had been shot in the back of the head. It is likely that the weapon used was a 12-gauge shotgun, since the victim was kneeling with his back to the killer. But shotguns were uncommon in robberies and were difficult to carry or transport without being detected, which made the police even more suspicious. In the murder of Belinda, it happened at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. A typical criminal would not dare go out with a shotgun in the daytime. David mentioned that he owned a few rifles. However, when the police came to search, the handgun involved in the case was not among the weapons that David had reported. The police asked David to come to the police station to file a report and confess the stolen items. Although worried, David agreed to participate. Police began investigating Belinda's relationships. A young boy named Riley Joe Sanders came to the attention of the police. Riley is a student of Belinda's at school. He has an explosive personality and is especially fond of skipping school. Belinda was not one of those teachers who turned a blind eye to student absenteeism. So when she noticed that one of her students, Riley, had been absent from class for months, she immediately reached out to her colleagues. She wanted to know if this was her problem as a teacher or if the boy was a systematic truant. Her colleagues answered that it was not her problem. The boy was brought up in a bad family, and no one cared about him. He appeared at school only rarely. Belinda couldn't leave it at that. That same evening, she visited his mother, who lived nearby, and had a serious talk with her, which later bore fruit. However, it wasn't quite what the young teacher had expected. Riley Joe Sanders came to class. But during a basketball game, when Sanders pushed his opponent and Belinda pointed out Riley's disgusting behavior, he insulted her with the last words and even said something like, "You'll answer to me for this, you better look around, especially in the evenings." Riley had no explanation for where he was on the day of the murder and had also threatened Belinda. He was brought in for questioning. His father had a 12 caliber gun, but when the police searched the house, they did not find a weapon. When Riley realized that the police suspected him, he confessed that he had been with friends on the day of the murder. He had kept quiet because he had been in a large group and did not want to hurt anyone. The charges against Riley were dropped. Beside that, the police began questioning Quentin Harland. David and Quentin were not only neighbors but also co-workers at the same school. They had a close friendship and often met outside of work to watch sports on TV or attend family barbecues. One day, David and Quentin discovered a new young teacher at the school named Heather Scott. Quentin showed special interest in her, even asking her out to dinner, but Quentin's efforts were unsuccessful because Heather declined the invitation. Quentin accidentally discovered a secret relationship between David and another woman. This made Quentin very angry and resentful because David was married and had a son. However, Quentin kept it a secret and did not reveal anything to others. In the work environment, David and this woman seemed to be a happy couple, and many people in the teaching staff had the same impression. However, no one knew that David had another wife named Belinda. Belinda did not suspect that her husband was having an affair. In fact, she even shared with Quentin that she suspected that David was cheating, but Quentin reassured her that David was a good man and could not do such a thing. However, the way David treated Belinda also changed over time. In the past, he was very respectful and loving towards her. But now he often insulted and hurt her. He called her fat, even though she had only gained a little weight after giving birth. He also often asked her to go to another room when there were guests in the house, as if she did not deserve to be with everyone. Belinda felt extremely unhappy and lonely when faced with this treatment from David. She did not dare to talk seriously with him about this, but cried at night and felt bad about herself. Meanwhile, David was in a very happy new romantic relationship with Heather. David increasingly distant from his family. The psychological pressure he put on his wife was increasing. Although he never raised a hand to hit her, their interactions consisted almost exclusively of insults. At this time, Belinda learned that she was pregnant. When she received this news, she forgot all of David's previous mistakes and felt very happy. It seemed that David also tried to present himself as a happy father, but he was unsuccessful. Sometimes David did not come home at night, and Belinda was afraid to ask him why he was absent at night. She was afraid that her husband might become very angry and cause a scandal. Therefore, Belinda often had to do everything herself while preparing for the birth of the child. She went shopping, painted the walls herself, and assembled the furniture she had bought. David seemed unconcerned and made no effort to help his wife. Belinda prepared everything for the upcoming baby herself, while David seemed to be only concerned with his new relationship. Christmas was approaching, and Belinda was 8 months pregnant. She decided to discuss with her husband David what gifts they would give each other for the occasion. However, David suggested that they skip giving each other gifts this year. He thought it would be better if they used their savings for the upcoming baby, as the doctors had warned that she might go into labor early, and the baby might be born before the new year. When Christmas came, although they had agreed not to give each other gifts, David did not give Belinda any small gifts. Instead, he suddenly packed his things and said that he would spend the New Year holiday hunting with his friends. Belinda felt disappointed and shared the situation with her sister. Her sister decided to help Belinda feel less alone. She also wanted to be there to care for Belinda, as doctors had warned that labor could start at any moment. What Belinda did not know, however, was that David had not gone hunting with his friends. Instead, he had spent the holiday with Heather, who was wearing a gold necklace that was said to have been a Christmas gift from David. After the death of Belinda Temple, David remarried Heather in 2001 and they had a son, Evan. But in November 2004, David's peace was shattered when the police came knocking on his door and arrested him on suspicion of murdering his ex-wife. David continued to deny any guilt. Investigators discovered that his new relationship with Heather may have been the motive for the crime. David's co-workers said that when Belinda became pregnant, David often bragged that he had found a younger, more beautiful woman to replace his wife. According to the prosecution's report, David killed Belinda as soon as she got home, still wearing her uniform and work boots. He then staged the crime scene to look like a robbery by making a mess of the house and quickly taking his son to the park to create an alibi. The prosecution also added that nothing was stolen from the house, and there was a vicious dog in the yard that would not let any stranger in. The murder weapon was probably dropped by David in the rice paddy, as witnesses saw David's car stop near the paddy, with only Evan in the car at the time. However, the shotgun was never recovered in that area. Heather's testimony claimed that before Belinda's murder, her relationship with David was not serious, and she did not even love him. These words certainly did not please Temple and introduced confusion into the jury's decision. Could David kill his wife for a non-serious relationship? Or was Heather lying to save her husband? It wasn't until 2023 that the case was revisited. David was found guilty after all and was sentenced to life in prison with parole after 17 years. His son Evan, while the trial was ongoing, did not believe that his father was capable of such a cold-blooded murder and supported him until the last moment. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach was born in São Paulo in May 1987. She grew up in a wealthy family and is the eldest of 2 children. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, is a successful and respected lawyer in the city. Her boyfriend Felipe Café, who comes from the same city, was born in July 1984. However, he was raised in a large family with quite difficult economic conditions. Since childhood, he had to work part-time to support himself and help his family. When the two met while still in school, they gradually developed a friendship and then became the first love of their youth. They had to hide their relationship in every possible way. It is worth noting that Liana's parents were religious and raised their daughter strictly. Liana was educated in religious values and participated in religious activities since she was a child, and her parents did not support romantic relationships when she was young. In addition, social inequality also played an important role. Liana came from a wealthy family, but she chose a man from a poor family. The prohibition of her parents did not make the young people give up on each other, but on the contrary, they decided to hide their relationship and secretly date in private places to avoid detection. In the fall of 2003, Liana and Felipe planned a trip to a remote and deserted land. Before starting the trip, they prepared carefully so as not to be discovered by their families. Felipe informed his parents that he was going camping with his friends, while Liana said that she was going to visit a church with her friends. She thought that this reason was convincing enough for her parents to believe her and agree to let her go without further questions. Liana and Felipe's family believed the story the children had created, so Liana and Felipe could enjoy life without worrying about their families finding out. The two were happy to be able to spend a week together. Liana and Felipe decided to go to Uji Guasu province, which had beautiful scenery. They brought with them essentials such as tents, sleeping bags, personal belongings, and some food supplies. However, financial problems caused difficulties for the young couple. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they made detailed plans to get to their destination by bus. On the early morning of October 31st, Liana and Felipe met at the designated location. They kept the meeting a secret for fear of being discovered. First, they took the first bus, then arrived at another city in the evening. Here, they stayed overnight at the bus station. Then, they continued traveling by 2 more buses to reach their desired destination. They then walked a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the forest, where they planned to make a fire and enjoy some private time together. The weather was warm, with a little sunshine, and although a little tired from the long journey, Liana and Felipe were still happy, joking and planning their vacation. As the couple walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay, they caught the eye of a group of locals near a pond. They were Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, nicknamed Pernambuco, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino. Chino, 16 years old but already the leader of the gang, thought that there was something valuable in the couple's backpack. The robbers stealthily followed the couple and hid deep in the bushes. While Liana and Felipe set up their tent and had a snack, they were unaware that they were being followed. The robbers waited until they were sure that there were only 2 young men and that they were not carrying weapons. Then Pernambuco and Chino attacked Liana and Felipe. The robbers searched all the bags and backpacks, but found nothing of value. The robbers then decided that they could demand ransom from the couple's relatives. Liana, too scared, immediately said that she came from a wealthy family and that her father would give them as much money as they wanted. The robbers were delighted to hear this information. While the plan to extort money was being finalized, the robbers thought about how much money they could extort. To prevent the couple from escaping, the robbers took them to an abandoned house near the farm, but the house had no windows or doors. They then decided to take the couple to the house of a gang member. When the robbers could not find the way to collect the ransom, they tied up and brutally beat Felipe, so that he could not escape or resist. Then all the gang members took turns raping Liana. After torturing the two for a while, the next morning, the robbers took the couple to a secluded place in the forest. The robbers led Felipe, who was seriously injured, deep into the forest. Then, there was a gunshot from deep in the forest. Liana realized what had happened and that her lover was no longer alive. The robbers told her that they had released Felipe and that the robbers wanted to keep her, treating her like a toy until they got bored of her. After their daughter left, Liana's parents soon discovered that she had not gone on a church outing with her friends as she had said. Her parents were also unable to contact her friends to find out where she had gone. Liana's family suspected that their daughter might have run away with her boyfriend and decided to contact his parents. And Felipe's family said that their son had gone camping with his friends. So they had no idea where the couple was. The situation became even more complicated because for several days, no one in the family had been able to contact the couple, and their phones had been turned off. Liana's family reported the incident to the police, who then gradually learned about the couple's route after they left home. Through investigation, the police found the last location where the couple left the bus and moved to a deserted dense forest where their phone was last disconnected in Mbuquasu. A large-scale search began with the participation of the police, rescue workers, and people who knew about the incident who decided to help. A large local businessman also joined the search, using his personal helicopter to search from the air and drop leaflets with pictures of Liana and Felipe. After a short time, the couple's camp was found. However, the atmosphere was very tense because they seemed to have been attacked. There were no signs of blood or fighting, but the couple's personal belongings were thrown around. Their tent had been slashed with a knife from top to bottom. While searching the scene, the rescuers found Felipe's mobile phone. But the most terrifying thing was that they soon discovered Felipe's body. The tied-up man had been shot in the back of the head, at close range. It was clear that the chances of finding Liana alive were slim, but the rescue team and everyone continued to search, hoping that Liana was still alive. Liana's father contacted the press to let everyone know about the incident. A large reward had been announced for any information on Liana's whereabouts, but still no leads. After shooting Felipe dead, the robbers took Liana back to the house where they had previously held them both. Here, the robbers, who had been invited by their accomplices Pernambuco and Chino, joined them. Chino declared that Liana belonged to him, and he could do whatever he wanted with her. He invited everyone to do whatever they wanted with Liana, and his invitation was accepted immediately. The next day, when they learned of the large-scale search operation, the criminals decided to move to another location to cover their tracks. They moved Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, a member of the gang. That night, the robbers went fishing and Liana went with them. Chino put his coat on Liana because it was cold and he wanted to show her that he cared. To his surprise, Chino's brother also arrived. Chino told his brother that Liana was his lover, and his brother immediately realized that Liana was the one the police were looking for. Chino's brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were looking for Liana. Chino decided that he had to get rid of Liana. He lied to Liana, telling her that she was free and that he would lead her out into the street. But in reality, Chino led Liana into the woods. There, he brutally murdered Liana with a knife and then smashed her head with a rock to make sure she was dead. Liana's body was found 5 days after the massacre. Liana was wearing the killer's jacket, which later became one of the key pieces of evidence. The robbers managed to flee without destroying the physical evidence. This naive confidence of the robbers helped the police quickly identify them and arrest all the members of the criminal gang. Chino left his jacket on the victim's body, which had traces of his sweat on it. In addition, he took the murder weapon home. He tried to wash the clothes with traces of Liana's blood so that he could continue to wear them. According to the results of DNA analysis, the police identified the members of the gang who tortured Liana. Chino not only did not deny it, but immediately testified, boasting that he had kidnapped, abused, and then killed the unfortunate victim. Chino describes in detail everything that happened to Liana in her final days. After a lengthy trial, most of the adult members of the gang received quite harsh sentences. Pernambuco was sentenced to life in prison for Felipe's murder. Antonio Geno da Silva, as well as Agnaldo Paes, also received life sentences. But Anthony Matias de Barros was sentenced to only 6 years in prison because he himself did not torture Liana but only provided the gang with his house, where everything took place. However, the gang leader, Chino, was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. For this reason, Chino was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a fairly lenient regime. Chino made several escapes, behaved aggressively and was unpredictable, so he was assigned to undergo psychological testing. Chino was found to have some mental abnormalities, which had terrible consequences, turning him into a sadist and murderer without any feelings of pity or remorse. After being diagnosed as such, Chino was transferred to a medical facility where he underwent mandatory treatment and rehabilitation. No punishment was imposed on him. Chino has a better life than before his crime. He now has his own room with a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He is fed 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, which is part of the policy of the medical facility where he is detained. Chino's monthly living expenses are estimated at $1,200, which is about $2,500. In recent years, Chino has regularly applied for release, noting that he has undergone all of his treatment and no longer poses any threat to others, which means he can return to his normal life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brayla Stone. Brayla Stone, a 17-year-old girl born and raised in North Little Rock, Arkansas, stands out for her fun-loving and outgoing personality. She lives in the suburb of Sherwood. Brayla is very active on social media, especially Instagram, where she attracts many followers thanks to her unique sense of humor. Despite being transgender and sometimes facing negative reactions from some people in the community, Brayla is always proud of who she is. She is not afraid to stand up for herself and oppose negative words or actions directed at her or her lifestyle. Brayla lives confidently and strongly, not letting anything stand in her way. Brayla naturally expresses her femininity in her daily life and on social media. This is shown not only through her style of dress and makeup but also through her behavior and communication with people. She realizes that true confidence comes from accepting and loving yourself, not from trying to meet other people's expectations. Despite life's challenges, Brayla persists in pursuing her dreams and holding on to her beliefs. She hopes to one day stand in a spotlight, proudly showing her true self to the world. Brayla is a strong and admirable girl. We use the pronoun she when talking about Brayla to show respect and acknowledge her gender identity. In 2020, Brayla began a relationship with Trevone Hayes Miller, an 18-year-old who worked at a local Arby's. However, Trevone has a troubled past. Trevone was involved in a murder when he was 14 and was part of a criminal gang. In April 2016, Trevone and two older teens plotted to rob Brian Thompson, a 17-year-old marijuana dealer. They lured Brian to the parking lot of a local recreation center, promising to buy his merchandise. Trevone was carrying a BB gun, while one of his friends was carrying a real gun. While Brian was making the transaction, the older teen suddenly shot Brian in the neck and stole $15. The group then fled. Brian's death highlights the brutality and guilt of Trevone and his gang's actions. It is clear that Trevone was a dangerous criminal. This raises the question of why Brayla would choose to date someone like that. It is possible that Brayla did not know about Trevone's criminal past, or that there were other factors in their relationship that we do not know about. Everyone has their own preferences and choices, and sometimes relationships do not follow conventional standards. However, not all young women are attracted to men with complicated pasts. Each woman has her own criteria when choosing a partner. Some may be attracted by empathy or hope that the other person will change for the better, while others may seek stability and security in the relationship. Police found about a pound of marijuana in the car and arrested all three suspects within a day of the shooting. Security cameras near the scene captured their images, leading to their quick arrest. Trevone, the youngest of the group, was initially charged with murder. However, he agreed to cooperate with the investigation and was prepared to testify against his co-defendants. This resulted in his charges being reduced to armed robbery in juvenile court. Although Trevone did not have to testify because his co-defendants pleaded guilty, he was prepared to disclose text messages in court. These messages showed that Trevone was the mastermind behind the robbery plan, despite being the youngest of the group. Trevone initially planned to commit the robbery at an abandoned house they had been using as a hideout. As a result, Trevone only served a short time in juvenile detention. Two older accomplices were convicted and remain in custody. In 2019, Trevone was arrested again for robbery and impersonation. He posed as a security guard at a Walmart and attempted to rob two customers in the parking lot. A few months later, he was arrested again on weapons charges. In 2020, Trevone and Brayla had a romantic and sexual relationship for a while. Brayla was a confident transgender person but still faced social stigma. She understood that not everyone accepted her. When she began her relationship with Trevone, Brayla agreed to keep it a secret. Although Trevone knew Brayla was transgender, he still felt uncomfortable making the relationship public. He feared the negative reaction from society and the possible consequences. Instead of public his relationship with Brayla, Trevone kept the relationship a secret. Their conflict escalated when Brayla discovered that Trevone was having an affair with another woman. Feeling betrayed, Brayla threatened to expose their relationship. Trevone responded by inviting Brayla to his home and offering to pay her to keep quiet. Trevone's fear causes him to have negative thoughts. Instead of facing society and taking responsibility, he wants to eliminate Brayla to keep the secret. Trevone tells her about his intentions through a phone call. However, she does not take the threat seriously, believing that Trevone only says it when he is agitated. She tries to calm him down and hopes that things will work out on their own. After the phone call, Brayla went to Trevone's home. A friend confirmed this while talking to Brayla on the phone as she was waiting for Trevone to open the door. About 5 hours after meeting Trevone, Brayla texted the friend, saying she was unhappy and they had been arguing for hours. Sadly, this was one of the last times anyone heard from Brayla. The next morning, a passerby called the police to report a body in a park in the Sherwood area of North Little Rock. Police found Brayla's body in a black Saturn Vue on a gravel road near 7224 Vista Point Court, which overlooks Gap Creek Drive. North Little Rock police had reported Brayla missing shortly before the discovery. When police arrived on the scene, they found the body of Brayla, a 17-year-old girl, in an abandoned car on a gravel road. She had been shot to death, with a gunshot wound to the head. Brayla's body was found lying face up on the floor in front of the passenger seat, with her legs extended behind the seat. The driver's side window was broken. The police report noted that there was blood inside the car and a strong smell of bleach. Investigators also found some of the interior upholstery discolored, possibly from exposure to bleach. News of Brayla's death has been widely reported in the media. Notably, her family requested that articles about Brayla use the pronoun he and her birth name, contrary to her expressed preferences prior to her death. It was clear that there was a clear disagreement between Brayla and her family about her identity. This was demonstrated by their lack of respect for her gender identity, even after her death. In the obituary, the family used an old image of Brayla before her transition, which caused a sense of disappointment and regret. Instead of celebrating Brayla for who she was, the family chose to present a past image that she had tried to change. This reflects the difficulties in society in accepting and respecting diversity in gender identity. After Brayla passed away, an Instagram account named Tap and Season commented that they killed her for $5,000 and posted pictures of money as evidence. In the next 24 hours, this account received a lot of criticism. Finally, the account owner admitted that he was just a 15-year-old kid making up stories to get attention. This thoughtless action is not only irresponsible but also deserves strong condemnation. The baseless confession of murder has caused more grief for Brayla's family and friends and affected the whole community. Anxiety and insecurity in the community are increasing as people read the comments and wonder if there is a real killer on the loose in Sherwood. The fact that the police have not arrested the imposter has only made the situation more tense. While this child may not face legal consequences, his actions have had serious repercussions. Hopefully, as he grows up, he will realize his mistakes and learn a valuable lesson about the importance of honesty and respect for others. After a week of investigation, the police arrested Trevone. According to reports, Trevone quickly became the prime suspect in the case. A friend of Brayla provided important information to the police. Brayla was with Trevone on the night of her murder, and the location where Brayla's body was found was a place Trevone frequently went to have sex, due to its proximity to his residence in Sherwood. After Brayla's death, Trevone's manager at Arby's contacted him. During the conversation, Trevone appeared very upset and said that he had screwed everything up and would not be returning to work for a long time. Although the manager tried to ask Trevone what had happened, he only replied that she would know soon. Upon hearing that Brayla's body had been discovered, the manager immediately reported the conversation to the police. With this information and other evidence, Trevone was finally arrested on August 3rd. At trial, prosecutors alleged that Trevone had murdered Brayla to prevent her from revealing their sexual relationship. According to the indictment, Brayla had discovered that Trevone was dating another woman and planned to retaliate by making their previous intimate relationship public. Fearing that he would be labeled a homosexual, Trevone allegedly paid Brayla to keep the matter quiet. However, when he learned that Brayla was still planning to reveal the information, Trevone killed her. At the time of the murder, Trevone, who was 19 years old, was charged with murder. He called his manager at Arby's to express his remorse for his actions. "I'm in big trouble and I could be dead," Trevone said. "I screwed up and I won't be able to come back for a long time." Trevone initially faced a murder charge that could have carried a life sentence or the death penalty. However, he agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence through a deal with prosecutors. The investigation found similarities between Brayla's murder and that of 17-year-old Brian Allen Thompson. Brian was murdered in April 2016 in the parking lot of the Bill Harmon Recreation Center in Sherwood. A center employee discovered Brian dead behind the wheel, having been shot in the neck. Trevone is one of 3 teens charged with his murder. Sherwood Detective Craig Grisham noted that in both cases, the killer fired from the passenger seat, making it difficult for the victim in the driver's seat to escape. Craig also mentioned in his arrest affidavit that both murders occurred at locations Trevone was familiar with, close to his home and convenient for him to escape undetected. While Trevone did not kill Brian, he witnessed the crime from the back seat of the victim's car, according to his testimony to investigators. A Pulaski County court has convicted Trevone Hayes Miller, 20, of the murder of Brayla Stone. Brayla, 17, was shot and killed in the Sherwood neighborhood of North Little Rock on June 25, just days before her 18th birthday. Trevone was sentenced to a total of 50 years in prison, 40 years for first-degree murder and 10 years for unlawful use of a weapon. He has been in custody since his arrest. About a week after the murder, Trevone must serve at least 35 years before he can apply for parole, which means he will be 53 when he becomes eligible for early release. The plea agreement, negotiated by attorney Burke Moore and Deputy U.S. Attorney John Johnson, reduced Trevone's charge to 1 count of murder. Brayla was one of 44 transgender people in the United States murdered in 2020, the highest number ever recorded, though the actual number is likely higher, as 34 additional deaths have been reported since. Many other victims may not have been recorded due to misidentification of name or gender, or because their deaths were not fully reported. Ashley Marie Preston, a journalist and transgender activist, has spoken out about Brayla's murder and called for action. She also objected to the media using Brayla's birth name instead of her real name, despite Brayla's family requesting to use her pre-transition name and pronouns. Local groups will hold a candlelight vigil tonight at Bull Park in Little Rock to protest the incident. A Change.org petition has received more than 100,000 signatures to date. The Center for the Revolution in the Arts, a youth organization in Little Rock, describes Brayla as someone who always made space for others to be themselves. They invite mourners to wear red and purple, Brayla's favorite colors. On Facebook, the organization emphasizes the importance of honoring Brayla's memory and seeking justice for her. Brayla was not just an individual, but a shining example of dignity and courage. She faced many hardships and pressures that others can hardly understand. However, Brayla always maintained her faith and desire to live a free and happy life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lori Slasinski. Lori Slasinski was born on September 21, 1981, to her parents, Casey and Arlene Slasinski. With her blue eyes and blonde hair, Lori was cherished by her family, including her older brother, Paul. The Slasinski family originally hailed from New York State but moved to the rural Alabama farmland near Auburn when Lori was 13 years old. Growing up in the countryside, Lori developed a strong love for animals. Her friends described her as beautiful, and she enjoyed spending time with them, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. Alongside her enjoyment of life, she was quite dedicated to her studies, and her family did their best to support her. After graduating from high school, Lori decided to attend Auburn University, where she chose to major in psychology and minor in criminology. To help her transition to college life, her parents purchased a mobile home for her to live in off-campus, situated in a well-kept trailer park popular among students. She lived there with her cherished dog, Peanut, a Yorkshire Terrier. Lori maintained a strong relationship with her family, with her mother calling her every day to see how she was doing. In 2005, she graduated with honors from Auburn University. Shortly after, she started working at the East Alabama Mental Health Center while continuing to live in a trailer park. She also planned to pursue a master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her accomplishments, unaware of the trouble that was on the horizon. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori planned a girls' night at her best friend Lindsey Braun's house. They intended to have drinks and watch a movie. Lori met Lindsey in their junior year at Auburn University, and they quickly became friends due to Lori's sweet and outgoing personality. Their friendship strengthened further when they both started working at the same mental health facility after graduation. Around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsey to say she was stopping at the store before heading to her house for movie night. Unfortunately, she never arrived. Lindsey became concerned when she didn't hear from Lori that night or the next day. She called Lori multiple times and left messages on her answering machine but received no response. When Lori failed to show up for work on Monday, June 12, Lindsey became very worried. It was unusual for Lori to miss work without notifying anyone. After Lori missed work again on Tuesday, June 13, Lindsey and another coworker decided to check on her at home. When they arrived at Lori's trailer, Lindsey noticed that Lori was not there. The door was unlocked and the air conditioning was running, which was unexpected. Inside, Lindsey saw that Lori's dog, Peanut, was in his crate. He appeared healthy and content, suggesting that someone had been taking care of him. Remarkably, his crate was clean, despite Lori being missing for several days. Lindsey sensed something was wrong, as it was unusual for Lori to leave her pet unattended. She recalled that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor because the dog wouldn't walk on the tile. However, those rugs were now missing, as well as the outside trash can. Later that day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a call from her workplace about Lori missing work for 2 consecutive days. Arlene tried calling Lori but couldn't reach her. Concerned for her daughter's safety, Arlene hurried to Auburn after informing her husband, Casey, about Lori's disappearance. When she arrived, Arlene entered Lori's trailer and noticed something was off. The door was slightly open, and Lori's bed was neatly made, but Lori was nowhere to be found. Her car was also missing. Upon further inspection, Arlene saw that several items were missing: Lori's kitchen rugs, a pillow from her couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that Lori used for her rake and shovel, and the phone cord for her landline. A sense of alarm started to rise in Arlene as she understood that something terrible had happened. She officially reported her daughter missing, but still holding out hope that she would return. The police began their investigation and searched Lori's trailer home. While they didn't find any clear evidence pointing to a suspect, they did see signs of a struggle and scuff marks on the wall. On the bed sheet, they discovered semen and found traces of blood on the doorknob. A coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also collected from the scene. On June 10, 2006, police obtained surveillance footage showing Lori at an Alabama Walmart, marking the last confirmed sighting of her. After this, no one knew what had happened to her. Later that afternoon, Arlene received a phone call from one of Lori's friends, a 25-year-old named Daryl Richard Ennis, commonly known as Rick. He claimed he had seen Lori on the day she went missing and suggested that she might have gone off to make a drug deal. Lori had met Daryl at the bowling alley where he worked and often spent time there while she was a student. Arlene recognized Daryl because Lori had invited him to celebrate Christmas with their family in 2005, feeling sorry for him since he had no family of his own. However, Arlene found it hard to believe Daryl's story. Despite Lori's friendship with him, she was convinced her daughter would never be involved in drug dealing. Arlene suspected that Daryl was lying but had no idea why he would make such a claim. Daryl provided the police with information about Lori's disappearance, but before they could act on it, a shocking discovery occurred. On June 14, 2006, just 4 days after Lori went missing, her car was discovered fully engulfed in flames near the bowling alley where Daryl had previously worked. This shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a potential homicide. Investigators noted that the fire destroyed any evidence that might have been in the car, but Lori was not inside when it burned. Nearby, a hand-rolled cigarette was found on the ground, along with a gas can located in the woods. This incident deeply distressed Lori's family, leading them to believe that something terrible had happened to her. The only lead they had at the time was the information provided to Arlene. When Daryl was questioned, he repeated the same story he had told Arlene but added more details. He stated that he and Lori had grown marijuana together and suggested that she might have gone off to sell her portion of it. He also mentioned that Lori could have been involved with some dangerous people. The police searched Lori's trailer, but despite a thorough investigation, they found no evidence of her dealing drugs. During the interview, investigators noticed several scratches on Daryl's hands and arms, which he said were from his dog. Investigators uncovered troubling information from Lori's friend, Lindsay. During their last phone conversation on the day Lori disappeared, Lindsay heard Daryl speaking in the background. Since Daryl was a friend of Lori's, Lindsay didn't think much of it at the time. When Lindsay texted him to ask about Lori's whereabouts, he replied that Lori was fine when he left her. Lindsay also told investigators that before Lori went missing, she had mentioned that he had written her a love letter, but she did not feel the same way. Lori had expressed to Lindsay that she was not romantically interested in Daryl and intended to discuss this with him. Investigators later learned that Daryl had informed his friends about his letter and Lori's rejection. When police re-interviewed him to confront him with new information from Lindsay, he admitted to meeting her just hours before Lori disappeared. He maintained that Lori was in good spirits and was getting ready to go to the store when he left her house. However, detectives identified several inconsistencies in his story, which led them to consider Daryl their main suspect. Their suspicion intensified after searching his car, where they found several significant items, including a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs. Investigators started digging into Daryl's past to find more evidence, but they were unprepared for the shocking discoveries. They uncovered that Daryl, at just 12 years old, had murdered his mother and stepfather. On March 3, 1993, only 10 months after their marriage, Daryl killed his mother, a well-liked churchgoer, by first shooting her in the face and then beating her to death with a baseball bat in their trailer in North Montgomery, Alabama. His stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, suffered the same fate when Daryl shot him in the face with a shotgun upon his return from work. After the murders, Daryl drove the family car and crashed it into a fence along the highway. Alabama State Trooper John Clark found Daryl walking on the road. When asked about his parents, Daryl admitted that he had killed them. During a search of the backpack he was carrying, Detective Clark discovered a kitchen knife and ammunition for both a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber firearm. When questioned about his motives, the emotionless 12-year-old stated that he was angry because his parents planned to move, and he didn't want to leave his school. Investigators believe that Daryl lived with his parents' bodies while still attending school. He also confessed that he intended to kill his 3 stepsisters, which shocked the investigators. Although his murders were horrific, he was too young to be tried as an adult. As a minor, he received a 9-year prison sentence for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori Slasinski. When Lori went missing, Daryl became the main suspect. However, despite his criminal history and the abundance of circumstantial evidence, authorities could not charge him with Lori's murder without her body or any direct evidence linking him to the crime. A few weeks after being interviewed by detectives, he left Auburn and eventually settled in Huntsville, Alabama, in 2007. By that time, Lori's case had grown cold. After moving to Huntsville, Daryl quickly moved in with a roommate named Abram. Abram noticed that Daryl had brought kitchen rugs with him, which he said were a gift from someone. Daryl also mentioned to Abram that he was in love with a woman from Auburn who had mysteriously disappeared, but he did not reveal her name. Abram thought these conversations were normal until he discovered his troubling past. This prompted him to ask Daryl to leave immediately. When Abram returned to his apartment, he found it in complete disarray. The police later recovered the rugs, and one of them tested positive for Daryl's blood. Abram also recalled seeing a Galileo thermometer in Daryl's room before he moved in, which was the same type that was missing from Lori's home. Unfortunately, the police were still unable to connect Daryl to Lori's murder, as the main suspect remained unidentified. The case stayed unresolved, leaving Lori's heartbroken family searching for answers for years. For many years, there were no developments in the case. Then, in 2016, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, established a cold case unit to re-examine Lori's disappearance. He worked with his longtime partner, Agent J.W. Barnes. Lori's case was their first focus. They revisited the evidence, sent some items to forensic labs for testing, and conducted multiple interviews. As they reviewed the evidence, Daryl became their primary suspect. Agent Mark was aware of Daryl's past and felt strongly that he had harmed Lori, but he struggled to find enough evidence or a body to prove his guilt. In an unexpected turn of events, Agent J.W. Barnes, who is Agent Mark's partner, discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing old files. He found an unopened report in an envelope that had been untouched for 10 years. After Lori disappeared in 2006, the police collected evidence from her trailer, but no one followed up until the results were finally analyzed. The analysis revealed that semen found on Lori's bed sheet and blood on the inside of the front door matched the DNA of Daryl Ennis. With this evidence, investigators were able to build a strong case against him, leading to an indictment in 2018. At that time, Daryl was happily engaged to a school librarian named Elena Atkinson and was living in Pilot, Virginia, where he worked for a company that designed and built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, which was his 38th birthday, Daryl Ennis was arrested by a U.S. Marshals task force 12 years after Lori Slasinski disappeared from Auburn. While Lori's family felt relieved, Daryl's fiancée and co-workers were taken aback by the news. He faced 2 counts of capital murder. The trial finally started on April 1, 2022. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting Daryl's involvement in the crime, including a cigarette butt found in Lori's bed sheet that contained his DNA. In response, the defense claimed that police might have taken the cigarette from Daryl's home and planted it at the scene. They also attempted to undermine Lori's character, suggesting she was a drug dealer to account for his DNA being on the bed sheet. Daryl claimed he had consensual sex with Lori before she disappeared, implying that they were still intimate despite her rejecting him. However, his account lacked credibility, especially after 2 witnesses provided shocking information. One former co-worker from Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, reported that on June 9, 2006, just 1 day before Lori's mysterious disappearance, he received a call from Daryl. He asked Jeremy if he could bring him gas and if he could keep the gas tank. Jeremy refused and recounted. He said he had run out of gas and wanted me to help him. Later, after police discovered Lori's burned car, they found a gas can that matched the description of a can missing from the bowling alley where Daryl worked. Terry Booth, a former co-worker from South Carolina, shared a disturbing experience she had with Daryl years earlier. She recalled asking him why he had moved from Auburn, to which he responded that he needed to get rid of a body. At the time, Terry believed he was joking, but Daryl's later arrest for the murder of Lori changed her perspective. Despite Daryl consistently denying the allegations and asserting his innocence, the jury reached a guilty verdict after 2 days of deliberation. He was initially facing the death penalty. However, the district attorney decided to remove that option after consulting with Arlene. Arlene expressed that agreeing to a life sentence without parole for Daryl would spare her from lengthy appeals while ensuring he would remain incarcerated permanently. On April 14, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently held at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. For Arlene, this verdict brought mixed emotions. With tears in her eyes, she expressed that it forced her to confront the painful reality that Lori would never return home, a hope she had clung to in her heart. In reflecting on Lori Slasinski's tragic story, it's impossible to ignore the heart-wrenching details that unfolded throughout her case. From her vibrant personality and promising future to the chilling revelations of Daryl Ennis's past, every twist and turn serves as a reminder of the fragility of life. The love between Lori and her family, especially her mother Arlene, paints a poignant picture of loss and longing for closure. The perseverance of investigators and the eventual breakthrough in the cold case remind us that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail. As we honor Lori's memory, we recognize the profound impact her life and disappearance have had on all who knew her, as well as the vital importance of safeguarding our communities from those with dark histories. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalia Martinez. Natalia Martinez was born in the late 1980s in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, and she was the youngest daughter in her family. While not much is known about her personality, she had a close relationship with her relatives, especially her older sister, Claudia. Her father was a senior salesman for a large international company that sold household appliances, which allowed the family to live comfortably. Natalia was a cheerful and friendly girl. During her teenage years, she formed a close-knit group of friends who supported one another during difficult times. These friends later described her as sociable and able to connect easily with strangers. After graduating from high school, Natalia began spending more time with her friends. They enjoyed going to various parties and eventually expanded their adventures by visiting the beaches of Uruguay for fun. To celebrate her 19th birthday on January 1, 2007, Natalia and her friends planned a trip to La Paloma, a small resort town, where they stayed for 2 weeks. On January 16th, they traveled to a nearby resort in the city of Reales, where Natalia was delighted to meet her parents and sister, who were there for a 4-day vacation. The Natalia family had a wonderful time enjoying beach activities and were well known in the town, as they frequently visited. They often returned to the same places, making it feel like a second home. On January 18th, Natalia and her sister Claudia decided to drive to Punta del Este, another tourist town less than an hour away from Reales. They planned to stop at a popular local spa located about halfway between the two towns in the Serra San Antonio area. After their beauty treatment, the girls planned to go to a disco with 3 of Natalia's friends. However, as the evening approached, Claudia felt very tired and decided to go home to their parents. Despite this, 19-year-old Natalia Martinez was determined to stick to her plans. She wanted to enjoy herself, so she went with her friends to a popular party at the local nightclub, La Erin, Canada, where they stayed until around 5 a.m. As morning approached, the girls decided to leave the party and head home. At that time, Natalia was talking with a man named Leonardo Roccovan, an old acquaintance who owned a bookstore. They stopped near the exit and continued their conversation. However, Natalia became so engrossed in her discussion with Leonardo that her friends decided to go outside and get into the car they had arrived in, planning to head home together. The girls got tired and got into the car. One of them decided to check on Natalia, but when they returned to the nightclub, they found that Natalia and Leonardo were gone. The friends realized that Natalia could not have left alone or with anyone else without letting them know. Since they did not see her leave, they began to worry. They went up to the second floor, out of the bar, and saw Leonardo's BMW in the parking lot. The owner was inside the car, and because the windows were tinted, Rosalia and Silva could not see if anyone was in the passenger seat. However, they did notice some movement inside the car. The girls called out to Leonardo to ask about Natalia. He said he was in the car with a friend and mentioned that he had spoken to Natalia briefly before they parted ways. He claimed he had no idea what happened to her afterward or why she didn't return to her friends. The girls assumed Natalia had gone home, so they got into the car and drove to her friend's relatives, who were at the police station, just a 10-minute drive from the club. Rosalia and Silva stopped near the house and hunked to get Claudia's attention, trying not to wake the entire family. However, no one responded, so they returned to the club where they last saw Natalia. The girls continued to search for their friend for about 2 hours, but their efforts were unsuccessful. No one knew where she had gone. Around 8 a.m., Silva returned home, exhausted and very worried about her missing friend. Worried about her friend's safety, she decided to tell her parents everything that had happened. She feared something bad might have happened to her friend. Her parents tried to reassure her, telling her to rest and that her friend was probably already home. So, she went to bed. Yet, when she woke up at 11 a.m. that same day, her concerns grew stronger. The entire Natalia family started searching for she. They quickly got involved, and her friends went to the club together to find out what happened. Unfortunately, they were still unsuccessful. The club was closed, and no one had any helpful information. They searched the surrounding area for clues but found nothing. Around 5 p.m., Natalia's family and friends arrived at the police station. Maldonado police investigators received several photos, including one of all the girls relaxing at a club that evening. This helped them understand what the missing girl was wearing so they could come up with a description for the search. The police took their statements seriously and began investigating. Initially, the family said that Natalia had been at a party where she may have had too much to drink and left with someone. However, Rosalia and Silva insisted that Natalia had not consumed any alcohol that night, as she often denied. They also dismissed the police's suspicions that they had used illegal drugs. Police began a search operation. They first went to the location where Natalia was last seen. The club was open, but there were no surveillance cameras at the time. Police spoke to club employees and learned that a group of 3 young men sitting at a nearby table had been trying to approach the women throughout the evening. Natalia's friends confirmed that the men had been harassing them. Despite this information, police ignored the group of young men and instead focused on the acquaintance with whom Natalia had been talking before she disappeared. It was no surprise that Leonardo immediately became the prime suspect, since he was the last person to see Natalia. However, all of Leonardo's acquaintances described him as a kind and calm person who had never shown any signs of cruelty before and was incapable of harming anyone. He was a young businessman. That night, his girlfriend waited for him in the car while he was talking to Natalia. After that, he said goodbye to Natalia and returned to the car with his girlfriend. From the car, he saw Natalia go down the stairs and go out onto the porch. From that moment on, Leonardo was distracted by his conversation with his girlfriend and did not see Natalia again. However, he was not worried about her, since he did not notice anything suspicious around. No one was screaming or making noise. Despite the police's suspicions, Leonardo insisted he had nothing to do with Natalia's disappearance. However, the police did not trust him. They needed to conduct a thorough examination of the BMW he drove away in after the party. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar car in various locations around the city, including near a forest on the outskirts. One man claimed he spotted a couple having sex in a car that matched the description on the night she went missing, near a lake by the woods. Police obtained a search warrant for Leonardo's car. During the initial inspection, they found a long, dark hair on the floor of the BMW and sent it for analysis. However, it did not match Natalia, it belonged to someone else. The interior of the car showed no signs of suspicious activity, no blood, or evidence of a struggle. Police speculated that Leonardo had cleaned the car shortly after Natalia Martinez disappeared, which would explain the clean condition of the car. Police used this detail as part of the evidence against Leonardo. However, they still lacked the evidence to arrest him. On January 22, a passerby driving on the outskirts of Polis discovered several items on the roadside. Among them were a woman's handbag containing a wallet and a pair of women's shoes. The most crucial piece of evidence was linked to Natalia Martinez, a case that was currently receiving significant media attention. Recognizing the situation, the witness promptly contacted the police. Unfortunately, the media coverage also led to the spread of various rumors, which Natalia's family had to repeatedly deny. One such rumor suggested that Natalia was involved with drug dealers, implying that she had become a victim of criminal activities. However, Natalia's father publicly refuted these claims in an official television statement. Despite the situation, rumors continued to spread. Some claimed to have witnessed her being attacked or even murdered. Instead of receiving assistance from the media, police found themselves overwhelmed by numerous false testimonies each day that needed to be verified, complicating the investigation. Meanwhile, the media eagerly reported even the most outrageous theories. The story was considered compelling and attracted many readers, causing journalists to add fuel to the fire of chaos surrounding the case. The rumors about the missing girl were leveraged to boost newspaper sales. Natalia's family endured immense pain following her disappearance. A large-scale search operation was organized, involving many police officers, friends, family members, and hundreds of volunteers. It was quickly determined that there was no evidence of the girl near the nightclub, prompting the search to extend into more distant areas of Uruguay. Ultimately, the entire coast was thoroughly searched. Most of the search operations took place on land, using service dogs, and later involving military and civilian aircraft. The City Fire Brigade also participated in the search and requested that the sewer systems be inspected. However, no traces of Natalia were found there either. By this point, law enforcement had largely concluded that Natalia was deceased, as the likelihood of finding her alive was very low. The critical window for finding missing persons is usually 48 hours. A significant finding occurred when a bone was discovered on the Grande Plateau, but tests revealed it was not human. Although the search had stalled and no new leads had emerged, Natalia's relatives continued their efforts. They remained hopeful that she was alive and being held against her will. In 2000, a female body was discovered in the forest near Lake Yulo. The body was in poor condition and was sent for examination to determine the identity of the deceased. This location was several kilometers from the club where Natalia was last seen, and the clothing found on the body led police to suspect it might belong to the missing Natalia Martinez. After the discovery of the body, police remembered a couple who had been seen having sex in a car near the forest, which drew attention to that area. The forensic expert who performed the autopsy struggled to gather important information because the body was in an advanced state of decomposition. To ensure a thorough examination, 5 forensic experts were called in. They determined that the body belonged to Natalia Martinez. Their overall assessment suggested that she likely did not die of natural causes, as there were faint signs of strangulation on her neck. Although they ruled out poisoning from substances or alcohol, they could not find evidence of physical or sexual violence due to the body's condition. It was noteworthy that the victim was found tied with nylon thread, but it remained unclear whether this occurred before or after her death. Several months later, while the investigation continued, an unexpected development arose. The man who had found her belongings on the roadside was discovered dead at the bottom of a cliff near his home. His name was initially kept confidential. Initially, it appeared that the man had voluntarily chosen to end his life. However, all his relatives insisted that he would never do such a thing. He was a deeply religious man, cherished his life, and loved his family. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, sustained long before the fall from the cliff, suggesting he had been thrown off. This led police to believe the two cases were linked. But more evidence was needed. The next tragic event involved Natalia's father, Ever Martinez. He had fallen into a deep depression after his daughter's death and the damaging rumors that were circulating about their family. He ended his life at home by shooting himself in the head. His body was discovered by his daughter Claudia and his wife. The police closed the case after confirming that he had acted alone, a conclusion that the family accepted. For a long time, police struggled to make progress in the investigation into Natalia's murder. However, new information emerged from text messages exchanged with a friend just days before Natalia's death. In these conversations, Natalia mentioned a man she had recently met online. It was later discovered that he was one of the men who had been at the nightclub on the day Natalia went missing. These three young men were sitting at a nearby table, and several witnesses had pointed them out from the beginning of the investigation, but this information was overlooked. Police identified all three suspects, who were slightly older than Natalia. After interviewing them, the police became even more suspicious of their involvement, as the men contradicted each other in their statements about where they were and what they did during the night and morning of that tragic day. After this, the police interviewed a witness whose identity was kept confidential for her safety. She was the girlfriend of one of the men who had been arrested. Her testimony revealed that a young man in the group, Rodrigo Verghese, was involved in Natalia's murder. At the time, he was 25 years old, and police later stated that he had previously provided false statements. During the interrogation, police recorded phone conversations that implicated the Rodrigo main suspect. They collected DNA samples from him, but these were not helpful for the investigation due to the advanced decomposition of the remains. After that, the police reached out to the friends and relatives of the Rodrigo. A young man was called to testify on June 8, 2010, along with his friends who had been at a nightclub on the night of Natalia's murder. They all claimed they had no involvement in the incident. They stated that after spending the night at the club, they hired a sex worker to join them in their continued festivities. However, they denied any connection to Natalia. Rodrigo, the prime suspect, denied spending time with the murdered woman and claimed he did not know her. However, messages from the girl revealed that they had spoken online and planned to meet at a party, suggesting that Rodrigo had lied. Initial questioning did not turn up any clues, but a day later, police spoke to the young people again in the hope of getting a confession. This time, Rodrigo confessed. He explained that he had met Natalia online and after chatting for a while, they decided to meet at a club. Unfortunately, their conversation did not go well, and as dawn approached, he suggested they go to another nearby nightclub. Rodrigo misled her. He wanted to be alone with her. During this time, he began to harass her, according to his confession. When she rejected his advances, he seemed to accept it. However, Natalia then suffered an asthma attack, which led to convulsions and ultimately her death, as she did not have her inhaler or any medication with her. Rodrigo was confused and unable to help her. He stated that he panicked during her attack and didn't know what to do, especially when she stopped showing signs of life in his car. After the party, he planned to return to his family's farm, a short distance from the city. However, after Natalia's death, he decided to dispose of her body to avoid any further repercussions. He headed for the woods, thinking it would be a good place to hide her. There, he tied Natalia up, dragged her deeper into the woods, and covered her body with branches. But this was only part of the story. A witness walking along the beach claimed to have seen a couple having sex, and Natalia's body showed signs of strangulation. It seems that Rodrigo neglected to mention that he had strangled and raped her at the same time. Police were later able to confirm that Rodrigo's other friends were not involved in the incident, so they were released shortly after Rodrigo confessed. Rodrigo was formally charged with murder and taken into custody. After the confession, it appeared that the prosecutor's office would easily prove the Rodrigo's guilt. However, in mid-2010, as preliminary hearings began, Rodrigo Verghese recanted his confession. He claimed he admitted to the murder under police pressure and insisted he did not commit the crime. This assertion seemed unlikely because his confession included numerous details only the actual killer would know, including the precise location where the girl's body was found. Still, Rodrigo maintained his innocence. Despite the evidence against him, his defense team supported his statement and sought to demonstrate that Rodrigo was not at the club that night. They presented mobile phone data and a statement from his employer confirming that he had been working his usual evening shift that day. The next day, he attended a friend's wedding, and no one noticed anything unusual about his behavior. On September 2, 2010, Leonardo Roccovan, the bookstore owner who was initially the main suspect in the investigation, was called as a key witness for the prosecution. Leonardo testified that during a conversation, he had an argument with a young man. Leonardo identified the young man as Rodrigo. This indicated that Rodrigo was definitely at the nightclub and not at work. Natalia's friends also confirmed that he was at the nightclub that night. Forensic experts, working with the prosecution, provided insights based on the autopsy results. They noted that, due to the typical symptoms of asthma, the girl could not have died from an asthma attack so quickly. While she did experience an asthma attack, it could not have occurred instantaneously. It took several hours. Additionally, there were signs of strangulation on the victim's neck, which was likely the cause of death. Unfortunately, the experts could not provide further details about the victim's injuries. From late August to mid-September 2010, the prosecution successfully constructed a narrative of the crime, leading to Rodrigo Verghese being found guilty of Natalia Martinez's murder. He received a 9-year prison sentence. However, in February 2011, Rodrigo's lawyer submitted an appeal, claiming that the court's ruling was incorrect and that the prosecution was biased. The lawyer argued that they failed to present a witness to the kidnapping or murder, nor did they provide any compelling direct evidence. Natalia's family expressed disappointment, saying that the criminal received a lighter sentence than the family had expected. Disappointed by this leniency, Natalia's relatives filed a civil lawsuit against Rodrigo Verghese for causing harm to Natalia's family, holding him responsible for her father's death. Initially, they mentioned that Rodrigo should pay $15 in damages. However, after further discussion, both parties agreed to increase the amount of damages to $7,000. The court rejected the request for a longer sentence. On October 27, 2014, the lawyer achieved his goal when Rodrigo, 29, was pardoned after serving only 4 years and 2 months in prison. His release was largely due to his good behavior while in custody. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bruce Pardo. In December 2008, the Ortega family invited their adult children and their families to their beautiful home in Covina, California, to celebrate Christmas. Covina is a quiet town with a low crime rate, located about 30 kilometers from Los Angeles. Joseph and Alice Ortega cherished Christmas as a time to bring their loved ones together. They had 5 children, 2 sons, Charles and James, and 3 daughters, Alicia, Letitia, and Sylvia. During this festive gathering, they engaged in their traditional poker games, enjoying laughter and joy while celebrating together. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. No one suspected that the person at the door intended to harm the Ortega family. So, they opened the door without hesitation. A few minutes later, a neighbor called 911 in a panic, yelling that the house across the street was on fire. He urgently requested firefighters to come quickly. Chaos unfolded at the scene. Firefighters were dispatched immediately to put out the flames. However, by the time they arrived, the emergency service had received several more calls from concerned neighbors. Some reported hearing gunfire, while others mentioned seeing people fleeing the house and crying for help. All available emergency crews were sent to manage the situation. Later, one of the police officers who arrived at the house described the scene as an apocalypse. Everything was on fire, and a large number of special service personnel and equipment had arrived, causing many people to rush around. Most neighbors came out of their homes, watching helplessly as firefighters worked to put out the flames at the Ortega family's house. In the midst of this chaos, they quickly located Letitia and Katrina, her 8-year-old daughter, who had managed to escape the violence. Remarkably, both survived. Initially, it was thought they had fled the fire, but the reality was much more disturbing. When the police arrived, Letitia was no longer at the house. Her daughter had been seriously injured by a gunshot and was taken to the hospital, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Letitia, a key witness, was interviewed at the hospital and shared a shocking story that disturbed the entire city. She explained that during Christmas celebrations, a man dressed as Santa Claus came to the Ortega family's home. Instead of spreading holiday cheer, he pulled out a gun and started shooting. After the attack, the man in the Santa costume set the house on fire to destroy evidence. Due to her injuries, Letitia couldn't provide further details. Neighbors backed up Letitia's account, saying that at around 2:45 a.m., they saw a strange car with a Santa Claus image driving away from a dead-end street near her home. In an effort to apprehend the shooter, police quickly began investigating who had been in the area at the time. After firefighters extinguished the fire, they found the bodies of the victims amid the rubble. In total, 9 people were killed, and their bodies were burned beyond recognition. Forensic experts later confirmed that only the hosts and their daughter had died from gunshot wounds. The other guests suffered from gunshot wounds to varying degrees, but ultimately died from smoke inhalation and fire. Some of the bodies were so badly mutilated that they could only be identified through dental records. The initial situation worsened and police discovered another victim in a pool of blood in nearby Sylmar, California. Bruce Pardo was found dead by his brother, who had just returned from a Christmas party. Upon the police's arrival, they discovered 40-year-old Bruce had a single fatal gunshot wound to the head. Police initially thought Bruce ended his own life, as a 9mm pistol was found lying on his knees, with another gun lying on the floor next to him. Police confirmed that Bruce had recently finalized his divorce from Sylvia, from whom he had officially separated on December 18, 2008. Notably, Sylvia's maiden name was Arte, and she was involved in the Coven massacre. Police quickly suspected a connection between the murders. They believed that Bruce's death was staged to look like a voluntary act, implying that the real criminal wanted to conceal his involvement. It is believed that Bruce, who was allegedly the attacker, disguised as Santa Claus, ended his own life the murders. Forensic analysis revealed that each of the 9 victims had been shot at least once. All the bodies had 9mm caliber bullets, which matched the weapon found beside Bruce's body. Later, police encountered Letitia. Despite the assailant's disguise, she was able to identify him. She claimed he closely resembled Bruce Pardo. Other family members present during the shooting were shouting this as well. With her testimony, police returned to the crime scene where Bruce's body was found. They began searching Bruce's car and discovered bloody footprints. They also confirmed that neighbors had seen the same car in the bay that evening, just before it fled the scene as the fire broke out. Bruce had asked Sylvia Ortega's parents, Joseph and Alice, to arrange a family get-together on Christmas Eve. This tradition involved the entire family getting together every year to play themed games. However, the holiday made them an easy target for a mysterious attacker dressed as Santa Claus. The attacker created a terrifying nightmare. It seemed that the attacker had harbored a deep hatred for the family, leading to such a horrific act, showing no mercy even to the children. Bruce had a negative attitude toward his ex-wife, Sylvia, and her family, which fueled his actions. The fire and shooting caused the most harm to Sylvia and her parents, whom Bruce despised. He was aware of the family's annual Christmas celebration and likely planned his attack in advance. This all felt too calculated to be a coincidence. Letitia continued recounting the events of that day. The Ortega family was gathered in large numbers. Sylvia, who was divorced from Bruce at the time, was present along with her 4 siblings, some of whom brought their children. Additionally, several friends attended the party. With so many people there, no one could recall the exact number of guests. During the celebration, just before midnight, they heard the doorbell ring. Although they weren't expecting any more guests, Sylvia's 8-year-old niece, Katrina, went to the door and looked through the peephole. She spotted Santa on the other side, dressed in his familiar red and white suit and carrying a bag. Excited, she told everyone about it. The adults exchanged puzzled glances, as they hadn't arranged for any entertainers in costumes. Later, neighbors mentioned that they had seen a man in a Santa suit approaching the Ortega family's home around the same time. One neighbor waved to him and wished him a Merry Christmas. The neighbor recounted that Santa Claus stopped at the Ortega house's doorstep, rang the doorbell, and waited. The neighbor then stopped watching, assuming it was just an Ortega family celebration. However, as he closed his door, he suddenly heard gunshots and screams, prompting him to call 911. The Santa suit fooled the guests, who thought a surprise was planned for them. They did not ask who the guests were and opened the door. He brought a bag, but instead of gifts, it contained guns and a homemade flamethrower. Letitia, Katrina's mother, grabbed a video camera to capture the festive moment. At that moment, Letitia heard applause. Her daughter Katrina ran toward Santa, who stood at the door with a large red bag. However, instead of presents, he pulled out a gun and aimed it at the child's face. Santa shot Katrina before anyone could react. Following that, he began firing at everyone in his path. Chaos erupted in the house as he ran out of bullets. He quickly retrieved a second gun with a full magazine. The assailant showed no mercy, even targeting children. In the ensuing panic, parents and 2 sisters sought refuge under the dining table. The attacker clearly saw his victims and shot them at close range, firing multiple shots at each, mostly in the back and head. Santa moved among them, continuing to shoot at the defenseless. He went through the rooms of the house checking and shooting everyone he saw. One of the bullets hit Sylvia's brother, James. Her other brother, Charles, screamed that he recognized the shooter. He barely had time to say Bruce Pardo's name before several gunshots rang out, and he was silenced forever. After moving through the house and leaving a trail of blood, Santa decided to destroy the evidence of his crime. He pulled a homemade flamethrower from his gift bag and began spraying fuel on the victims and surrounding furniture. Immediately, the entire first floor was engulfed in flames. Letitia said that the Santa suit caught fire and the attacker to flee the scene. This gave Letitia the opportunity to reach her daughter and take her to safety, but she was unable to save anyone else. Her child suffered serious head injuries, prompting a neighbor to quickly call emergency services. A 16-year-old boy and 2 other guests, along with everyone in the living room within sight of the attacker, were injured or killed. The survivors could only watch helplessly as the house burned, especially when a gas cylinder exploded inside. Firefighters arrived shortly after to extinguish the fire, with nearly 80 people on the scene. Despite their efforts, it took them an hour and a half to bring the fire under control. Police were initially skeptical, but a thorough investigation of the crime scene and autopsy confirmed that Bruce had indeed ended his own life, as no one else was in the house when he pulled the trigger. He also suffered severe third-degree burns to his arms and legs. Letitia mentioned that his Santa suit had caught fire during the incident, raising doubts about whether Bruce was actually responsible for the crime. It was clear to everyone that Bruce and Sylvia met through a mutual friend at work. At the time, Sylvia was divorced and had 3 children from her previous marriage. She and Bruce quickly connected and started dating. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by December 2006, they decided to get married. Following their wedding, they bought a lovely house to accommodate their growing family. Bruce had a stable job as an electrical engineer at a large local company and also volunteered at the local Catholic church. Generally, people viewed him as a positive and helpful person, always willing to assist others in difficult situations, unless the conversation turned to money. Bruce always aimed to become wealthy. He worked hard, which allowed him to buy a boat and several cars over time. With their good income, he and his wife were able to purchase an expensive house with a mortgage, making their first payment together. However, since the house was located in a high-end area, their relationship began to suffer. By 2007, Sylvia started to voice her frustrations more often, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibilities she had to shoulder. She worked and earned a good salary while also raising 3 children, whom Bruce did not help with. Despite this, he took on most of the financial responsibilities for repaying the mortgage. Sylvia felt that Bruce did not contribute enough to their common goals. Despite this, she still took care of his dog. They had a joint savings account, but she believed that she did more to support them financially. Conflict arose over money because Bruce was stingy, which frustrated Sylvia. They had originally agreed that Sylvia would support her 3 children from a previous relationship, so Bruce refused to spend money on them. At first, their family life was relatively stable, but Bruce's greed soon began to annoy Sylvia. She expected their savings to total around $88,000. In 2007, when she checked the account, she discovered that Bruce had transferred all their savings to his personal account, leaving only $9,000. This incident significantly strained their marriage. Later, Sylvia learned that Bruce had been unfaithful throughout their marriage. From the beginning, he insisted he didn't want children and denied being a father until Sylvia found out from his mother that he had a child. Bruce had a normal childhood. His school years were normal and free of negative influences. He was quite intelligent. As a result, he entered California State University, Northridge. After completing his studies, he took a job as an electrical engineer at a large research company. Bruce excelled in his profession, which brought him recognition and rapid advancement in his career. However, this was not enough for him. Bruce became focused on the earnings of his colleagues and developed jealousy whenever someone made more money than he did. To cope with this, he started claiming more working hours than he actually worked. Those who knew him well described this behavior as an obsession with money. This obsession ultimately resulted in his dismissal when the deceit was discovered. Relatives noted that Bruce struggled with relationships with women. Although he was attractive and dated many, these relationships often ended abruptly. financial problems were a constant issue in his life. Bruce started dating a colleague named Dea, and they both seemed serious about their relationship, even planning a wedding together. However, financial concerns became a point of contention. Despite having a good income and some savings, Bruce was unwilling to spend money on a lavish wedding, considering it a waste. He preferred a simpler celebration, but Dea, who was set on having a grand wedding, chose to pay for the extravagant event she had always wanted. Dea took care of all the arrangements for the ceremony and paid for everything herself. However, Bruce was absent. He had backed out of the wedding, running away with $3,000 from their joint account, which they had been saving for their honeymoon. Instead of marrying Dea, he went to Palm Springs by himself and spent all the money on his own enjoyment. This decision also ended his relationship with Dea. In the following years, Bruce dated several women. But his greed led to the failure of those relationships as well. Friends noted that he was consistently the cause of the breakups, as none of his relationships lasted long due to his obsession with money. This continued until Bruce turned 30. During this time, he met Elena Luca, and they eventually married and had a son named Matthew in 2001. Tragically, when Matthew was only 1 year old, an accident occurred. While Elena went to the store for a while, Matthew was in Bruce's care. But Matthew fell into the pool in their yard. When Elena returned, she found Bruce and their son not breathing. It is unclear why Bruce did not call for help or attempt to resuscitate Matthew. Elena quickly called 911. Although doctors were able to revive Matthew, he suffered severe, irreversible brain damage that left him partially paralyzed for the rest of his life. Bruce's erratic behavior led Elena to suspect that he wanted to abandon their child, whom he seemed to find uninteresting. Bruce then chose to leave Elena and their disabled child, without providing any financial support. This left Elena in a difficult situation, as she was not working and in dire need of help. Despite her constant requests and innuendos, Bruce chose to ignore her, avoiding all contact with Matthew and ignoring Elena's pleas. By the time of the tragic events, the medical bills had exceeded $35,000, and with no payment agreement in place, Elena turned to the court for help. She was later awarded a monthly payment of $240, but the amount was not enough to care for a disabled child. When Sylvia discovered his past actions, she chose to end their marriage. She was outraged by Bruce's lack of concern for their son, which made it impossible for her to stay with him. Consequently, she filed for divorce. The court ordered Bruce to pay Sylvia a one-time settlement of $10,000, which was significantly less than what he had withdrawn from their joint account. Additionally, he was required to pay monthly alimony. Sylvia also retained her engagement ring and the dog they had adopted during their marriage. The division of their real estate was still being decided in court. Bruce's ideal life began to crumble. Not only did he go through a costly divorce, but he also lost his job, which made his financial situation worse. Accustomed to a high standard of living, he could no longer maintain his previous lifestyle. They believed that during this trying time, Bruce hatched a sinister plan for revenge. Just before Christmas, Bruce purchased 2 handguns, an air compressor, a high-octane flamethrower, and a custom-made Santa Claus suit. He used these items in the murders of the Ortega family on December 24th. After the murders, Bruce contacted the police to report a vehicle parked in front of his Pasadena home. When the license plate was checked, police discovered that the Dodge Caliber had been rented by Bruce Pardo. The vehicle was equipped for long-distance travel, with everything needed for an escape, including a laptop, several sets of clothes, food, and maps of both Mexico and the United States. It is possible that Bruce had planned to flee the country after the murder, but then changed his plans. In the trunk of his car, police discovered 4 pistols with 13-round magazines and about 200 rounds of ammunition. As a result of these events, A tragic array of consequences ensued. 13 children were left without parents. The massacre could have been much worse had the children been present at the Christmas gathering. Following the attack, custody of the surviving children was granted to their uninjured family members. One of the hardest-hit victims was a girl named Katrina, who was shot in the head while greeting Santa Claus at the entrance of the house. Surgeons fought to save her life, and miraculously, they succeeded. However, she endured a long and difficult recovery thereafter. Toxicology tests revealed that Bruce Pardo was under the influence of illegal substances during the attack, which amplified his violent behavior. It also emerged that he had booked a flight for Christmas morning. Given his chaotic mental state, he frequently changed his plans. Just half an hour after the massacre, he purchased a ticket to Canada. His intention may have been to flee. Police later discovered that Bruce had intended to stop in Minnesota, where a close friend lived. In the days before the murders, he had called the friend to express his plans to visit. However, it is still unclear whether Bruce actually intended to make the visit or if it was just a hoax to fool the police. The police also discovered that Bruce may have been plotting to kill his biological mother, as she was the one who informed Sylvia about Bruce's disabled child. In addition, his mother still maintained a close relationship with Sylvia and the entire Ortega family. She was supposed to be at the Christmas party, but she was sick that day so could not attend, so she escaped death. Despite his controversial nature, those who knew Bruce had never previously witnessed aggression from him. He was typically calm and balanced, albeit greedy and cunning. Police theorized that a tumultuous divorce, financial worries, job loss, and an obsession with money pushed Bruce onto the path of crime. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Stevens. Pinckneyville, located in the United States, is a small town known for its friendly local community and laid-back lifestyle. It is also a great place for fishing enthusiasts. On July 25, 2010, two fishermen were fishing in the near Boku Creek Bridge south of Pinckneyville when they spotted a strange object in the water. Approaching it, they realized it was the body of a girl floating face down. Her right arm was tied with a rope to a concrete block, but the body had risen to the surface due to decomposition and shallow water. The body was in a deteriorated state, making identification difficult. The only clues were a belly piercing and a necklace with a musical note pendant. After checking the information in the database, law enforcement officers discovered that a similar girl had recently disappeared. She was Sidney Stevens, 15, who had gone missing on July 19, 2010, exactly 1 week before body was discovered. Sidney's parents, Tracy and Tim, said she had recently suffered from mental health issues after learning that they had separated shortly before she went missing. She was shocked to learn that Tim, the man who raised her, was not her biological father. This revelation led to a mental disorder and severe depression. She ran away from home multiple times, isolated herself from friends, and even attempted ending her life. To protect her, the family decided to keep her at home under supervision. At this time, she was either cared for by her mother, Tim, or her 17-year-old half-sister, Dakota Wall. The house doors were kept locked, and everything was under control until the morning of July 20th, when her mother found she missing at 6:30 a.m. Tracy suspected something was wrong because Sidney's room was in complete disarray, the dresser was overturned, and belongings were scattered everywhere. She called Dakota, who suggested Sidney had run away again. However, Tracy's concern grew when she saw that Sidney was not logged into social media since the previous evening, which was unusual. Upon inspecting the room, she noticed all of Sidney's personal items were still there, including her purse, phone, shoes, and clothes. It didn't seem like she had run away, it was as if she had left in her pajamas and without shoes. Tracy attempted to locate Sidney but was unsuccessful. Sydney's friends were also unaware of her whereabouts, so Tracy filed a missing Sydney report with the police. The detectives were initially hesitant to take on this case. They knew Sydney had problems, so they thought she just ran away from home again and would come back home later. Therefore, investigators shelved Tracy's testimony and only her relatives and friends participated in the search for her. They searched but in vain. A week later, on July 25, 2010, her body was discovered underwater. Her mother, Tracy, was summoned to the police station to identify her. Tracy immediately recognized her daughter's jewelry and confirmed a belly piercing. Dental records definitively identified the body as Sydney's. Once the body is identified, police need to determine what happened to her. The autopsy revealed shocking details, that is, Sydney was murdered. Forensic experts found evidence of multiple injuries, including gunshot wounds and signs of a violent death. This thing stunned everyone. They could not understand why the suspect could target the young girl in such a brutal way. The day before Sydney disappeared, she had planned to go on a hike with her friends, but her mother did not allow it, which made her very sad. She spent the entire day alone under house arrest. When police investigated the house, they found no signs of a break-in. The doors were always kept closed, suggesting that either a family member let the kidnappers in, or they had a key. The relatives insisted they didn't give keys to any strangers. At the time of the incident, only Tracy and Dakota were in the house. The police began questioning the closest relatives, friends, and Sydney's acquaintance, as those close to the victim are often involved in such crimes. Due to the violent nature of the crime, the investigators suspected a personal motive. Tracy reported coming home around 10 p.m. At that time, Sydney was in one room watching TV. Tracy had taken prescribed medication to sleep in her room. Tim was not home that night. He was on a business trip. The most scrutinized individuals were Sydney's sister, Dakota, and her boyfriend, Chad Bennett, who is 20 years old. They both denied any connection to the crime. Dakota stated that she saw Chad the day before, when he visited her to watch a movie, after which he went to work. Chad confirmed her account. However, detectives were suspicious of Chad because he had a criminal record, which included possession of illegal substances and petty theft. As a result, the police brought in his accomplices for questioning: Carl Dane, 18, James Glazier, 17, and Robbie Mueller, 15. All three were friends with Dakota, the old sister of Sydney. During questioning, the young men were evasive and inconsistent in their statements. Ultimately, they told a similar story but with different details. According to their accounts, on the night of July 19, 2010, Carl, James, and Robbie went to Sydney's house. They had a brutal plan as part of their group ceremony, which required performing an evil deed. The plan was to kill Sydney's mother, Tracy, without leaving any evidence. However, as they were moving around house, Sydney woke up, stepped into the hallway, and called for her mother. The attackers stopped her in time, preventing her from making any noise. They held her mouth and nose so tightly that she lost consciousness. Then, they decide that killing Sydney is enough for their initiation ceremony and they choose not to harm Tracy. They carried her body to the car, but she regained consciousness. They continued to torture, beat, and strangle her until she passed out again. They then disposed of her by dumping her into the water, tying a concrete block to her body so it would sink and so that no one can find the body. However, this plan backfired because, during decomposition, gases are formed, causing the body to eventually float. All three individuals, Carl, James, and Robbie, were arrested on July 28. Their story seemed highly implausible. They initially intended to kill Tracy, but instead killed Sydney. Something was evidently amiss. The police suspected that, besides this heinous crime, they might have raped she, as her trousers were down when the body was discovered. However, none of the suspects admitted to this act. The body's condition was poor because the water had erased all evidence, so the police can't confirm this. About the lowered trousers, they denied rape, they suggesting it was related to the influence of illegal substances. Law enforcement knew that gangs have a hierarchy and strict discipline. Although Chad, the leader, denied his guilt, it was inevitable that he was involved in this crime. In fact, the attack could only have been carried out with his approval, especially since he could not avoid participating in the initiation everyone was talking about. It was known that Sidney had gunshot wounds, but members of Chad's team chose not to mention it, resulting in their statements being unreliable. Sidney was shot with a .22 caliber pistol. Carl, a member of Chad's group, who had once met Sidney, possessed a .22 caliber Ruger pistol. This weapon was quite costly, and Carl claimed he couldn't afford it, saying Chad had given it to him. Under the pressure of skilled police questioning, members of Chad's team admitted that he directed their actions. They agreed to testify against he, even though he continued to deny any involvement in the crime. Consequently, Chad was also arrested, though the police suspected there were more people involved in Sidney's murder. They believed Dakota might have been part of it, but she continued to deny any involvement, asserting that she loved her sister and they had a good relationship. Detectives continued their investigation after noticing many inconsistencies in the story. When speaking with the Sidney family's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that Dakota actually despised Sidney. She usually tries to join Dakota in group activities, which annoyed the group, especially Dakota. Dakota wants to spend more time with her boyfriend, Chad, instead of with her. However, Dakota was responsible for looking after she while their parents were at work and also have to clean and do other housework. Dakota couldn't get rid of Sidney, so she had to put up with it. At Sidney's funeral, Dakota appeared happy during the service. She smiled casually and chatted cheerfully with everyone who came to pay their respects. She seemed unaffected by her younger sister's passing. Police followed Dakota and they later questioned her for several hours. The detectives intentionally confused her with unexpected questions to catch her in a lie. Eventually, she began to disclose some details. She admitted that during a trip to another city, Nashville, she overheard her friends from the group discussing what had happened. This was on July 21st. Just 2 days after Sidney disappeared. She said 2 members of the group, James and Carl, were talking about the murder. At first, she thought they were referring to someone else since Sidney's body had not yet been found, but then she realized they were speaking about her 15-year-old sister, Sidney. They discussed how they beat, strangled, and drowned Sidney, then tying body to a concrete block. Dakota began her story by explaining that on July 23rd, she was with Chad's group at Carl's house, where she overheard a conversation about the murder. Carl mentioned having a gun and he shot someone with that gun. Under police pressure, Dakota disclosed more details, admitting that she knew who was in a car parked near the house on the night Sidney disappeared. These individuals were members of Chad's group. They entered the house and did something to Sidney. She confessed this to the officer, but explained that she had been too afraid of they to speak up earlier. However, Dakota's account was becoming inconsistent. In her new testimony, she alleged that Carl had threatened her life if she informed the police. The officers noted her lack of emotion and how careful she was in giving her testimony. Investigators knew that she seemed pleased about Sidney's death, casting doubt on her innocence. To probe further, the police pretended to know everything about the crime, including Dakota's relevance, but claimed they were unclear about the motive. This unsettled she, yet she did not confess to any wrongdoing. The case garnered public attention. They intensely discussed the shocking crime. Rumors circulated widely, including one claiming that Dakota discovered Sidney's diary a few days before the crime, revealing that Sydney had slept with her boyfriend, Chad, 2 years earlier. It is important to mention that 2 years earlier, Dakota had not met Chad, yet this might have infuriated her as Sydney's older sister. However, the romantic relationship, especially between Sydney and Chad, was never verified and was doubtful to investigators since Sydney was only 13 at the time. Although this motive wasn't confirmed, there were several other possible reasons for the murder. The following day, Dakota was called in for questioning again. She alleged that her boyfriend, Chad, who was accused of the crime, had shown disturbing behavior. He was aggressive and often lost control, attacking people frequently. It seems that he cannot avoid committing a serious crime. He had a conflict with Sydney's ex-boyfriend, Bubby. According to Chad's testimony, he heard voices urging him to attack his family. He even set their house on fire. He also allegedly shot his favorite cat, hitting it with 15 bullets. None of these claims were verified. Detectives also knew that at 10 p.m. on the night of Sydney's disappearance, Dakota called he. It's believed that the group members arrived at her house then, possibly asking Dakota to open the door or planning something before the attack. Dakota did not answer the police's questions about Sydney's murder, and it seems she is deliberately trying to mislead the investigation. As a result, she was arrested for obstruction of justice. However, at that time, the police did not have enough evidence to proceed with a trial. Chad admitted to being the leader of a gang called the City Saints, whose members followed his orders without question. This thing might have endangered Sydney's life. Chad, however, insisted that he never ordered the murder of Sydney and denied any involvement, even expressing regret over the incident. Meanwhile, Carl participated in interrogations for 2 days as the prosecution prepared for the trial. He recounted that on the night of Sydney's disappearance, he had been drinking at night. Then, Robbie, also drunk, came to see him and suggested going somewhere. Carl agreed without asking for details and to feel secure and took a .22 caliber pistol with him. Carl was very emotional during the interrogation and openly cried. This made the detectives question whether he was an accomplice to a terrible murder or no. It was possible that he went for a walk without knowing Robbie planned to kill Sydney. However, the police were skeptical about his tears, as they could be a sign of remorse or a disguise. Carl stated that they picked up James on the way and drove to the Sydney family's house. Robbie climbed over the fence and entered the house while everyone was asleep and Carl waiting outside in the car. After some time, he became worried because they were taking too long. He claimed he went inside to find his friends and leave together. The door from the courtyard was open, providing direct access to the basement where Sydney lived. The police were suspicious that the door might have been unlocked at night, especially since there were no signs of forced entry. It seemed likely that someone helped the criminals approach Sydney unnoticed. Suspicion falls on her sister, Dakota. Carl explained that when they entered the property, they noticed that Sydney had woken up due to the noise. She recognized both criminals, Robbie and James. She asked what they were doing here. Then, she tried to wake her mother and call for help. However, Robbie attacked although she resisted, but they overpowered her. He threw her onto the couch and tied her hands, but she fought back fiercely. He then pointed a gun at her. Likely due to the shock and injuries from the struggle, so she lost consciousness. They were aware of her mental health challenges and her history of running away from home, so they decided to make it look like she had run away again. They removed she from the house through the open door, dragged her to their car, and drove off with her to ensure she wouldn't be found. Halfway through the journey, Sydney regained consciousness and began to resist desperately. Immediately after that, one of the attackers forced her to the ground and strangled her. He kept her in that position for a long time, until she passed out again. They then took she to a river by car, but she regained consciousness again midway. During this time, they claimed that she expressed a desire for intimacy, and they had had intimate relations with her. And the strangulation may have been part of a perverted game. Subsequently, Sydney was shot in anger and thrown into the water. However, this testimony of incident was met with disbelief. It was obvious that the intimate intercourse was not of her own volition. Robbie presented a different account to the police. He stated that Carl played a significant role in torturing the girl. Carl had previously been in a brief 3-day relationship with she, but then she broke up with him because he didn't care about her, after which she began seeing someone else. Afterward, he vowed to take revenge on all the girls who betrayed him, starting with Sydney. At that time, no one expected his anger to lead things so far. Robbie, the youngest in the group, at just 15, insisted that he hadn't harmed anyone. As a new member, he simply followed the others and did what they told him, staying within the boundaries of what was allowed. On October 5, 2012, Chad's group members disclosed new information about the case. The police finally gathered enough evidence to build a full case and charge the group members. That day, they questioned Dakota to understand how the door to Sydney's room could have been left open at night. It's known that due to her mental illness, she could pose a danger to herself. Her mother ensured that she couldn't leave by keeping the door always locked. Sydney was under house arrest during all of this. It became evident that the incident was neither accidental nor mistaken because her mother and Dakota were meant to supervise every evening. During questioning, the police were able to get Dakota to confess. She admitted she left the door open, intending to play a prank on her sister, coordinated with members of the group. Finally, the police obtained this long-hidden confession. Later, Dakota disclosed another crucial detail. Before the crime, she had a meeting with Chad's team members, where they discussed their plans. She admitted they intended to kill Sydney. With this information, everything became clear. Even if Dakota didn't directly participate in the murder of Sydney, she was aware of it and did nothing to prevent it. She knew what was going to happen, so leaving the door unlocked wasn't accidental. She planned it to allow the attackers to enter the house and killed Sydney. Investigators believe Dakota underwent a brutal ordeal to join Chad's group, which explained her aided the killers. Her cheerful behavior at her younger sister's funeral was because she completed the ritual to join the group and get rid of her annoying younger sister. Then, their group celebrated after the murder. Carl later acknowledged his guilt, writing an apology letter to Sydney's mother, Tracy, on August 18, 2010. He admitted that he had done evil and now had to pay with his freedom. Even though he knew that it couldn't bring Sydney back to life, but he asked for forgiveness. Tracy read the letter and believed Carl showed no remorse. Although he was arrested early in the investigation, it took 2 years for them to appear in court. Carl Dane pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received the 60-year prison sentence. However, before being transferred to a federal prison, he was discovered dead in his cell, with a note expressing regret for his actions. Another member of the group, James, was also found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years. Robbie Mueller initially sentenced to 37 years, but his sentence was reduced to 26 years after an appeal. He will be eligible for parole in late 2023. The gang leader, Chad Bennett, cooperated with investigators and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, resulting in a 20-year sentence. He took a plea deal and will be eligible for parole in 2026. Dakota received a 26-year prison sentence, with the ability to apply for first parole by the end of 2023.